3:22 p.m. in Gwinnett County, a caller called 911. When a 911 operator answered the phone, he asked for the caller's emergency. The caller said he is calling because of his neighbor. He said his neighbor was shot. The operator asked the caller what happened. The caller said he heard multiple shots. He said he heard a lot of shots right now. He said his neighbor collapsed on his doorstep. The operator asked the caller if his neighbor is still breathing. The caller said he is still breathing. He said he is still alive. The operator asked the caller if any other person lived with his neighbor. He said Bob lived with his neighbor. The 911 operator told the caller that paramedics and policemen are already on their way. As police and paramedics respond, another caller called 911. He told the 911 operative that he is a Lyft driver. He said he dropped a young man off at his house and he heard gunshots as he was approaching the house. He said he saw a guy stumbling across the cul-de-sac. He said it looks like the guy has been shot. He said he doesn't want to drop the young man in his vehicle off until everything is all right. A few seconds later, the caller told the 911 operatives that officers have arrived at the scene. The officers saw a black male with gunshot wounds. He was barely breathing. As paramedics rushed the victim to the hospital, one of the officers said they need to clear the house. As officers were approaching the house, an officer discovered another victim shot dead in the garage. Later, they discovered a third victim shot dead in the living room. For homicide detectives, their chance of solving a murder is cut in half if they do not get a lead within the first 48 hours. A 10 years veteran of Gwinnett PD, Corporal Douglas Loomis, who worked at robbery at SBU before joining homicide last year, will lead the investigation. The victim at the hospital is a 45-year-old black male. He was shot 3 times in the chest, once in the back, and once in the leg. When CPL Douglas arrived at the scene, he met some police officers who were the first to respond. He approached them and asked them what they have. One of the officers showed CPL Douglas where the original call came from. CPL Douglas asked the officer if the neighbor said anything. The officer said within 30 seconds of their arrival, the neighbor went completely out of it. Officers were unable to get a statement from the victim who died at the hospital. 64-year-old Robert grew up in Maryland. He moved to Georgia in his 30s. He worked as a maintenance engineer. Robert is survived by his mother and 3 brothers. CPL Douglas asked for the identity of the third victim. The officers said they are unable to identify him. They just know that he is a white male. One of the officers said somebody told him that they saw somebody run around the back into the swamp. The Lyft driver who called 911 said a man fled into the woods carrying a blue jacket. CPL Douglas asked the officers if the man was sure of what he saw. The officer said the man told him he saw it. With the information, the K9 handler off Lindsay tries to pick up the man's trail. A few seconds into the search, he called officers and told them he got some fresh footprints. He said the back of the area is a giant swamp. He said he won't be able to check very well. He said it might not be a bad idea to start Air 1. Air Unit joined the search using cameras that can track body heat. The officers in the house took a walk across the house. While they were walking, they found a 9mm gun near the car in the garage. They checked the unidentified white male in the garage. They noticed that he was shot 4 times, once in his head, shoulder, back, and leg. They discovered casings littered around the ground in the garage. In the living room where Bob the homeowner was found, they discovered that he has a gunshot wound to his chest and one to his arm. They found 2 9mm casings very close to his body. An officer said it looks like the homeowner was shot when he was walking down the stairs. CPL Douglas asked the officer if he thinks the homeowner tried to run for the door. He said he doesn't think so. Upstairs, the team discovered a child's bedroom. CPL Douglas asked the officers if they have searched the house for the child. The officers said they have searched for the kid, but he is nowhere to be found. CPL Douglas asked the officers if the dead guy at the hospital was the guy that shot these 2, and they shot him. One of the officers said they don't know. When the officers walked out of the house, CPL Douglas said, "For now, he doesn't know how everything is connected." One of the officers said when he was here, he met someone who told him that the kid is not Bob's child. He said from his explanation, the kid belongs to the dead guy at the hospital. The team decided to reach out to SRS to try to get the name of the missing child and his mother. CPL Douglas said they need to find out where the kid is. While some of the team works on finding the child, the K-9 retracts the suspect sent to discover the blanket close to the swamp. Detective Lindsay said they need to cast around that area and see if they can find anything. In the house, the team located a house with an open crawl space. Inside the house, they located a bunch of muddy clothes, a couple of bags, and an AK pistol. The team believes the suspect starched a pair of jeans, a black bag, drugs, and an AK-47. CPL Douglas said what that means is that the suspect was running with a rifle, drugs, and he was half naked. CPL Douglas asked the officers if anyone has tried to knock on the door of the other house. The officer said no. CPL Douglas said how are they sure if the suspect is not in there holding the family hostage? CPL Douglas immediately got a search warrant signed and led the team members to the house. While they were approaching the house, he said he doesn't know if the suspect is there or holding anybody hostage. He just feels they need to check the house. The team make entry into the house and started clearing it. After a few minutes of searching, the team did not find the suspect. 3.5 hours in, a neighbor agreed to hand over a surveillance video to the detectives. Using the crime scene address, an SRS officer found the name of the guardian of the child who has been living at the house. The team was able to get the name of the fiancée of the victim who died at the hospital. Her name is Jennifer. As soon as detectives got Jennifer's number, Detective Loomis put a call through to her. When she answered the phone, Detective Linus introduced himself. He asked her where she is. Jennifer said she was trying to see if anything happened at her house today because somebody called her and told her that the house got shot up. CPL Loomis said they are trying to get across to her to make sure that she is okay. He asked her if she has been at the house today. Jennifer said she hasn't been there. Jennifer said she left there on Thursday night because she and the victim argued. Detective Loomis asked Jennifer if the kid is with her. Jennifer said the kid is with her sister-in-law. Detective Loomis asked Jennifer who else was at the house who wore glasses. Jennifer said Stephen Finch. She said Stephen was over there earlier. She said she spoke with her fiancé a few hours ago and he was hanging out with Stephen. She said Stephen and her fiancé were hanging out throwing darts in the garage. Detective Loomis asked Jennifer if her fiancé told her what he was doing there. She said he didn't because they had plans. She said she got a hotel room. She said they were just trying to have some time alone and see if they could work things out. Jennifer asked Detective Loomis if her husband is still alive. Detective Loomis said he is sorry but her fiancé passed away. Jennifer screamed. She started crying on phone. Detective Loomis told Jennifer that he would join her soon and he ended the call. Detective Loomis called Detective Smith and told him the name of the guy in the garage. He said Jennifer told him that the name of the guy in the garage is Stephen Finch. 33 years old Stephen Andrew Finch was born and raised in Georgia. He worked at a local seafood company to support his 3-year-old son. Stephen lives behind his parents, 2 sisters, and 2 brothers. Stephen's father Carl drove from Georgia to Gwinnett when a family acquaintance told him that his son may have been killed. While CPL Loomis was talking to Stephen's father, Stephen's Aunt Jessica called in. He told her that they just confirmed that Stephen Finch is one of the victims. Detective Loomis said he is sorry that this happened. He said he is going to make sure that they contact their family first when anything comes up. He said they are still trying to put the evidence together. Jessica said he went there to see his girlfriend. He said Stephen's girlfriend is pregnant for him. Detective Loomis said he is so sorry and he ended the call. A few minutes later, CPL Loomis and CPL Chris Smith met with one of the deceased fiancés. CPL Loomis asked her when the last time she was at the house was. She said she went there yesterday to get some clothes. Bob's fiancé asked CPL Loomis if her husband was among those that were killed. CPL Loomis said yes. As soon as she heard that, she started crying. She said she and the deceased were planning to get married. She said they had a big fight on Thursday, but he kept telling her to come home and everything. CPL Loomis asked her what happened on Thursday. She said her fiancé made her send some money to some people in Mexico. She said the money she sent was drug-related. She said she told him that she didn't want to live that way. She said she told him that he is putting their life in jeopardy. She said she kept telling him that. She said he was drinking when she was talking to him. She said a few seconds later, he stood and gave her a black eye. She said she left immediately after he hit her. She said the deceased was going to visit a doctor for anger management. She said that was the reason she got a hotel room. She said if he is dead, she might as well tell the truth. She said she has clue on who killed her fiancé. CPL Loomis asked her for the name of the person she thinks committed the murder. She said his name is Justin. She said they were selling drugs and Justin was the guy that used to go rob everybody. She said Justin usually beat them too. CPL Loomis asked her if Justin is a black male. She said yes. She said she doesn't know Justin's last name, but the officers can find out because Justin's brother get killed at his hotel not too long ago when he was running from the police. She said he shot the police dog. She said Justin's brother was supposed to be robbing somebody. She said Justin thought Jennifer's fiancé set his brother up. She said she knew Justin was threatening the deceased and telling the deceased that he was going to get him back. CPL Chris Smith looks up the incident concerning Justin's brother. Bob's fiancée identified 21 years old Justin as the man she knows. She said he has a lot of guns. She said she is willing to tell the truth because she wants whoever did this to be sent to jail right now. Bob's girlfriend asked the detectives if they still need her. CPL Loomis said they don't. He said if they need anything else from her, they will contact her immediately. The team finally gets a surveillance video from one of the neighbors. CPL Loomis and CPL Chris watched the video together. They saw how the suspect got into an argument with the victim who died at the hospital. The victim who died at the hospital was shot first. The camera was too far away for detectives to see the suspect's face. The team decided that CPL James should contact Uber to try and contact the driver who brought the suspect to the scene. 6 hours in, Uber reported that Justice Lask was the passenger. CPL James sent the driver's name and telephone number to CPL Chris. He said the passenger dropped off in an Uber. He said he got picked up in an Uber and he got dropped off in an Uber. According to Uber, Lask requested another ride that he used to flee the area. Uber gave detectives the address where he was dropped off. Detective Eddie sent the identity of the brother that shot Blue and it has the same address. The address checked back to Justice's father. CPL Chris said they will drive to the address and see what they can get. While detectives head out to begin surveillance on Lask's house, CPL limos called the driver who drove Lask to the crime scene. When the driver answered the phone, Detective Douglas said he knows it's late, but he is wondering if the driver can meet him at his headquarters so that he can show him a lineup of photographs. The driver said he can come right away. Detective Douglas said that would be good and he ended the call. Half an hour later, the driver was at the homicide headquarters. As soon as he arrived, he was taken into an interrogation room. Detective Richter went in and introduced himself to the driver. He played a recording of the call they made to Uber for the driver. After playing the recording of the call to the driver, Detective Richter showed the driver a photo of the suspect and where the murder happened. As soon as the driver saw the picture, he recognized the suspect. He said he was in the backside when he picked him. He was writing something on his seat. He said he doesn't argue with people because he doesn't know what they are going to do. He said he dropped him off and he turned around. He said suddenly he heard gunshots. He said after 3 or 4 minutes, he got another call from the same guy. He said he was thinking he just picked this guy and it's him again. He said he returned there to pick up the guy he just dropped off. He said when he got there, he met another Uber guy with a BMW. He said the Uber driver dropped a minor kid. He said the Uber driver he met there asked him if he heard the gunshots. He said the Uber driver told him that they shot the guy at the corner. He said the Uber driver was calling the dead guy and asking him if he was okay. He said he ran away. Detective Richter gave him another photo lineup to see who he can recognize in the photo. The Uber driver was able to identify Lask as the guy he dropped off before the shooting. He said when Lask got out of his car, he pulled his mask. He said because Lask was behaving weird, he looked at him with the hope of finding out who he is. He said Lask's name was showing justice. Detective Richter asked the Uber driver if the driver asked him to wait when he dropped him off. He said he did not ask him to wait. Detective Richter asked the Uber driver if he had any conversation in the car with Lask. He said Lask was smoking. He said he told Lask that he is asthmatic and he cannot handle smoking. He said Lask told him that he will finish his smoke outside. He said that was the only conversation they had. Detective Richter asked the Uber driver if the suspect was carrying anything. The Uber driver said the suspect was carrying a backpack. Detective Richter showed him a picture of a backpack that was found in the car space and asked him if the backpack on his phone was the same as the one the suspect had. The Uber driver identified the bag as the one the suspect was carrying. The Uber driver asked detectives if the guy is the victim or the criminal. Detective Richer said he is just someone they are trying to find. He asked if they cannot catch him. Detective Richter said they will get him. The detectives appreciated the Uber driver. He took his leave while they also walked out of the interrogation room. The detectives joined other team members who watched the interrogation from their computers. Detective Douglas Loomis thinks he now has enough evidence after securing a search warrant for Lask's address. Detective Richter said it will be nice to take Lask off the street today. As SWAT prepares to hit Lask's house, a report came in about a suspicious person in the neighborhood where the murders took place. The caller said the guy stopped the car and it was kind of strange. He said the guy ran to a house hiding and trying not to be seen. The 911 operative asked the caller how long the guy has been staying there. The caller said the guy has been there for 4 minutes. He said the guy drove off just now. The 911 operator asked the caller the type of vehicle the guy drove. He said the guy is in a black Camry. He said the guy is wearing a hoodie. He said the suspect is wearing a green, black, and brown army camouflage. The operator asked the caller whether the guy is a white or black male. The caller said the guy is a black male. The caller said the guy is coming back again. He said he can see him again. The 911 operatives told the caller that officers are on their way. He told the caller to stay on the line with him. A few minutes later, the officers spotted the black Camry driving slowly from the neighborhood and pull it over. 11 hours into the investigation, Justice Lask was brought to homicide. Detective Richter and another detective went into the room to interrogate him. Detective Richter asked Justice if he has ever been to police custody before. He said he hasn't. Detective Richter told Justice that the reason why he was there was that some people saw him walking behind a house. Detective Richter asked Justice what he was looking for back there. Justice said he has a friend who stays over there. He said he was trying to see how far they were away from the house. Detective Richter asked Justice where his friend lives. He said his friend lives on the next street over. Detective asked Justice to describe the house. He said his friend's house is in a cul-de-sac. Detective Richter asked Justice how he dove into the cul-de-sac. He said he drove through the left. Detective Richter asked Justice why he was just driving the car around. He said it was because they had it blocked off and he heard on the news that a homicide occurred in that area. He said as soon as he heard the news, he knew what to do, which was to go and get his stuff. He said he was trying to get to the victim's house where he left his gun several days ago. Detective Richter asked Justice what type of gun he left at the victim's house. Justice said it's an AK. Detective Richter asked Justin that when was the last time he shot a gun. He said he shot a gun some months ago. He said he was hurrying to get his gun because it's his. It has his name on it. Detective Richter asked Justice if he was there in the afternoon. He said he was there. Detective Richter asked Justice how he got there. Justice said he got there with Uber. Detective Richter asked him what happened when he got there. Justice said his friend wasn't at home, so he left. Detective Richter asked Justice if he walked into the garage. Justice said he didn't. Detective Richter said he did. After much pressure from the detectives, Justice admitted to speaking with his friend who was the victim that died at the hospital. Detective Richter asked Justice what they talked about. He said they were trying to help him keep his guns. Detective Richter asked Justice why he left his gun at his friend's house. He said he needed some money. Detective Richter said, so his friends loaned him money for his guns. Detective Richter asked Justice if he was going to pay back the money. Justice said he had the money. He said his friend just didn't want to give it to him. Detective Richter asked Justice that he said he saw it over the news that a homicide happened when he was over there. He said he doesn't know how Justice was there. Justice kept quiet for some seconds. After some seconds, he said the victim was arguing with him about trying to pick up his guns. He said his friend had a gun. Detective Richter asked Justice if he shot his friend because he was carrying a 9mm gun. Justice said that was how it happened. Justice said when he came into the garage, the victim was clutching at him. He said the victim got his hand ready on a gun, so he felt threatened. Detective Richter asked Justice how many times he shot the victim. He said he shot the victim twice. Detective Richter asked Justice what he used to shoot the victim. He said he used Glock. Detective Richter asked him why he shot the victims. He said he shot them because he was trying to get back his guns. Justice said he had a Glock 22 with a micro kit and a wooden Draco. Detective Richter asked Justice where he kept them. He said it was in his backpack. Detective Richter asked Justice if he knew that was how everything will turn out. Justice said he went there to get his stuff. He said he just wanted to collect his stuff and leave there and never go there again. The detectives walked out of the interrogation room and joined their colleagues who watched the interrogation on their computer screens. Detective Richter said he is happy that they got a confession. He said the case is straightforward since the suspect said he shot the victim. Just 12 hours into the investigation, CPL Douglas Loomis closed his case. Justice Lusk was charged with 3 counts of malice murder and 3 counts of felony murder. He is awaiting trial 7 months after Stephen's murder. Stephen's sister Jessica is still learning to cope with the loss. Jessica and Bob's mother Mary became friends. Do you need police, fire, or medical? Asked the 911 operator. I need the police. I have a body to report, replied the caller with a shaky voice. Whose body? What's going on? The 911 operator asked again. It's the next door neighbor. My roommate comes in freaking out and says the guy's dead, and he looks dead, responded the caller. The police quickly rushed down to Tulsa, Oklahoma, with their siren vehicle responding to the call the 911 operator received at 9:10 p.m. that fateful day. Police and the medical services made entry to the apartment. The living room was dark, small, and untidy, and the windows were met shut. It was not spacious at all since the little room was filled with all kinds of personal belongings and properties. At the extreme opposite to the door was a couch. A table was placed at the center of the room, separating the couch and the door. On the table were all sorts of junk and books. A man was found, snugged over the couch. We have a DOA, said one of the policemen without remorse. Then came Detective Mark Kennedy. What's up, man? He asked a policeman full of confidence. The policeman responded by updating him about the incident. Yet to enter the building, he brought out a pen and took some notes. He finally decided to go up and see the situation for himself, then noticed the door was not forced open, seeing the locks are still intact. He found his way into the room. He stood right in front of the dead man, who was identified as Jacob Murphy.
Jacob Murphy was a 41-year-old man, born in Louisiana. He moved to Tulsa as a child. He was a gifted musician and performed in the Tulsa choir, but worked part-time as a cook and waiter. He left behind his mother and 2 children.
Detective Kennedy's assistant brought out a touch to examine the dead man from a distance. After assessing him for some time, he then concluded he had been down for a few hours. There were clicks from a camera as a cameraman was taking pictures of the scene. He has got an injury right there to his left wrist, added the assistant. There will be the bullet, said Detective Kennedy responsively. Another policeman said, there is a towel under the arm right there. Maybe he is trying to wrap it up at some point, added a voice from behind. Quite a bit of blood, the cameraman said pitifully as he continued to flash his camera's light on everything. Maybe there is a body shot or something. Detective Kennedy finally muttered something. The team then waited for the medical examiners to determine how Jacob died. Does he have a phone? Asked Detective Kennedy. No, he does not, replied his assistant confidently. Detective Kennedy jotted that down. The dog was barking when we came in earlier, added the assistant, looking towards the direction of the restroom. Who's the guy that reported it? He is in his apartment, next room, answered the assistant. Then Detective Kennedy and his team went to the neighbor's apartment. He let them in and gave them some information he might know about Jacob and how the incident happened. He mentioned that Jacob had been drinking a lot. He continued by saying Jacob was letting some friends crash his apartment, including a homeless woman named Pikachu and her boyfriend, Mike. According to him, they just moved there some weeks ago. Do you know his phone number? No, the neighbor replied. You know he got a phone number, right? Yes, he responded. Can you give me a description of Mike? Mike is a black dude, frequently found around the neighborhood. He lived with his mom, I guess, and was thrown out on the street. He came to Jacob and Jacob let him stay with him. Why will someone want to hurt him? I don't know, replied the neighbor in despair. Jacob is a good guy who wants to help everybody out. As Detective Kennedy asks the question, he jots down the neighbor's response, while his assistant takes note of the neighbor's expression. They thanked him for the cooperation and left the apartment. The man was terrified. His hands were shaking as though he was suffering from electric shock. He folded himself up. He looked suspicious though, but his feebleness showed that he was just scared. While Detective Kennedy went back to the homicide to interview the witness, LT, Chase Calhoun, Kennedy's assistant, was in the car where he reached out to Corporal Schilling at the headquarters to help identify Jacob's friends. I was looking for Mike and her girlfriend nicknamed Pikachu, said Calhoun. Every report that I found that references Pikachu is this Sheila Sierra. She has a boyfriend by the name Michael Bowen. They frequent that area right around where this happened, so I would say they are pretty likely going to be the pair, replied Schilling from the phone. Calhoun found the picture of the woman Schilling was describing on his small computer. He thanked Schilling and drove off in the car, saying these folks are not going to be outside. They are going to be ducked out, as he looked out in the dark through the car's window.
Still driving, Calhoun's phone rang. He checked and received it. It was Kennedy. Kennedy told him he had found the address of Jacob's parents. Okay, sounds good, replied Calhoun. Calhoun immediately navigated his car according to the address sent to him by Kennedy.
He arrived at a big, white-story building with a big tree in front. There was a small lawn just in front of the building. Calhoun walked up the part to the door. He knocked at the door and someone responded by flashing a touch on his face. He introduced himself, then he asked, "Are you related to Mr. Jacob Murphy?" "I am his mom," replied the person with the touch. The woman came out to Calhoun and the two walked down to the shed of the big tree in front of the house. Calhoun shared with the woman that her son had been shot. "I hate to tell you, your son had passed away," he added bitterly. He placed his left hand on her right shoulder, consoling her. "I know this is overwhelming, but it is really important now that you tell me about who he has been dealing with," requested Calhoun with the voice of an angel. "There is a couple that Jacob was saying, Mom, they're just real nice. They're real sweet. They're just down on their luck. And he was letting them sleep in his bedroom," replied Jacob's mom. "Was that a black man named Mike?" "Yeah." "And a white woman named Sheila?" "Sheila might be right," Jacob's mom responded aptly to Calhoun questions. "He's been helping, trying to help different people," she added, trying to hide her soberness, even though it was clear she'll soon burst into tears. Calhoun, trying to figure out a motive, asked her if Jacob had been having issues with drugs lately. "No," she responded with apt. "I had trouble with him drinking. He had depression from being injured. His arms were messed up from breaking them skating with his son, and the doctor messed up on the surgery. He's been fighting pain specialists to stay off drugs," she said conclusively, trying not to make a wimp. Then she continued, speaking with a few breaks in her voice, crying as she said he has been working a little bit at Ty's, the restaurant, so he had cash on him. He could work a few hours and not hurt. "Jaeger," she bawled as if she just woke Hugo from her sleep. "Is his dog still there?" she asked doubtfully. "There was a German Shepherd there. We had to put him in the bathroom," answered Calhoun swiftly. If he felt like it was somebody that was threatening, he would have been protective of Jacob. Jacob's mother said with a little bit of hope, "Sure, that's all for now, ma'am. We will be calling you if we get some more information. I am sorry for your loss," he concluded. Jacob's mom starts crying as she tries to speak. He said to her it's all right as he found his way back to his car in the dark. Kennedy was now in his office. His phone rang. He picked it, and a thick masculine voice was heard. He recognizes it as one of the detectives still processing the crime scene. He had a contact wound to his chest. He definitely was shot, said the voice from the phone. "You still can't find his cell phone, right?" asked Kennedy. The voice answered, "Yeah," then continued, "He had money in his wallet." Nothing looked like they were looking for drugs and money. The voice said frankly. "All right, sounds good," responded Kennedy, then hung up the call. In Kennedy's office was another man, a detective too perhaps. The man gave some information on Jacob that he saw. The victim has a contusion on his head and he has an imprint on his face. Maybe the man with the gun poked him in the face with it, said the other man in the room. Kennedy then turned facing the other man in the room. The man was standing, resting his hand on a box placed over the table while assisting his head to stay in place. The man was wearing a badge t-shirt just like Kennedy's, but black, while Kennedy had a red one on. He had his ID worn around his neck. He seems to be Kennedy's partner. We don't have a phone. They didn't take anything else. Somebody could have actually taken the phone. Maybe he had something important on it, Kennedy said. The witness, Jacob's neighbor who had the shooting, was in the interrogation room. His hands were cuffed to the back of the chair he was sitting. He doesn't understand English as he's not an American. Kennedy got himself a translator to help with that. "Let's go round up here and see what we got," he said, getting already worked up. "So, basically I just want to know what he heard, what he saw, and what he noticed," said Kennedy. The translator sitting next to Kennedy relayed the information to the witness, who was sitting at the other end of the table, in an unusual language. The witness responded in the same unusual language. "I got home around 4 in the afternoon. There were about 6 people in the parking lot." He identified the people by their gender, 2 females and 4 guys. Kennedy shows him a picture he had on his phone. "Have you seen that woman before?" he asked. "I think she is the one who was there," the witness replied. "In fact, she was with the black male," he added. "It was around 5 or 5:30 p.m., he continued. "And suddenly I heard some kind of gunshot. I turned to the apartment. A black guy and a white guy came out, and seconds after, the guy who was with the woman came out, and they went toward the park up there," he concluded. "The female did not come out?" asked Kennedy confusedly. "No," the witness replied. Kennedy then asked him if he would be able to identify the people who ran out of the apartment if he was to see them again. "I'm not so sure," the witness responded. Kennedy, getting frustrated by not getting too far yet, showed the witness a picture of Mike from his phone and asked, "Did you see that guy in there?" Instead, the witness started describing who he saw. He said, "The guy I saw had much bigger hair and his face was a little bit thinner. In fact, he doesn't look like him," he added swiftly. Kennedy and the translator thanked the witness and walked out of the interrogation room, leaving him behind still cuffed. Kennedy returned to his office. This time Corporal Nathan Schilling was there. The two were talking about Sheila Sierra. Sheila was familiar to them. She has prior conviction for controlled substance with the intent to distribute and possession of firearm while in commission of a felony. "That house that we pulled 15 people out of that one time?" asked Schilling. "Yeah, that's where she's from," responded Kennedy. "We better hit that house right now," said Schilling. "If we hit that house, we will have to dig. We will have more people in the day than we will do now." Next morning, Kennedy and the team head for the house where she is known to hang out in a red pickup. They got to a rusty neighborhood. The vehicle stopped in front of a small apartment. The men walked to the house and knocked at the door. A man and a woman answered the door. "We're looking for Pikachu," requested Kennedy. "Pikachu stayed down here at the fourplex, the end of the apartment facing mine," the women from the house described. "When was the last time you saw her?" asked Kennedy. "They were at Quick Trip yesterday. I saw her arguing with Mark," the woman replied. "Mike was drunk," she continued. "His mom moved over around 31st. Kennedy thanked the woman and returned to the police station.
The team found a name for Mike's mother. They ran it, but she doesn't have a recent address or file. The computer operator finally found a place registered in her name.
A phone rang. "It's Margaret," the policeman said. He then read out the address forwarded to his phone to the other policeman. "Driving the red Ford Jeep on a highway." The other policeman nodded. "If they've got a car, that means they're mobile. They can be anywhere," added the policeman with the phone. The detective searched the neighborhood looking for the white woman. He called upon a random woman and asked if she had seen Pikachu lately. "I haven't seen her since probably yesterday," the man replied. "She said he saw him at the apartment." The fourplex. Yeah, the woman responded to Kennedy's question. When I went there, nobody would answer, continued the woman. Do you see a guy in there? I'd seen a guy with his head down on the coffee table. I thought he had just passed out, but the woman kept replying to Kennedy. So, I just left, she muttered. And he wasn't murdered. Was there really? This time replying with another question. The woman is sounding scared. Yeah, replied Kennedy. I thought the guy had just passed out, the woman said softly, almost crying. Oh my God. Sir, if I'd known there was something wrong. Oh my God. The woman is now terrified. You said you were there yesterday. Yes. Why did you go there? Because I wanted to see Pika, the woman said, weeping. Okay, Pika is your friend. Yes. Do you know where she lives? No. The woman is now sobbing badly. Kennedy then showed her a picture from his phone. Is that her boyfriend? The woman nodded. Yeah, I'm scared of him. Why are you scared of him? Kennedy asked. He's getting more interested, seeing that this might lead somewhere. Cause he hit me, the woman said shamefully. Why did he hit you? Getting more interested, cause he thought I stole some weed or something, and I didn't. The woman kept responding even though she's already terrified. All right, I appreciate it, thank you, Kennedy said, letting the woman out of his car. All right, the woman replied as she stepped out of Kennedy's vehicle. Kennedy then drove off, navigating back to the main road. 2 hours later, in the search for Mike and Sheila. All right, so I posted that address. He's an associate. A voice sounded for the telecommunication device. White Pontiac in the driveway, the voice concluded. That's it. The policeman driving the red Ford Jeep said, and his companion shrugged in conclusion. Then the driving policeman said, Mike and I are going to set off here, in case someone takes off running out through here. He then parked his car a few miles away from the suspected hideout. One of the officers at the suspected hideout spotted Sheila and Mike. They're coming out, an officer in another vehicle said before driving towards the hideout. Tulsa police, an officer shouted. Good morning, do you know Murphy? Asked Kennedy. Yeah, replied Sheila. Do you want to talk about it? Yeah, Sheila responded again. I've seen on the news, she then uttered. We want more than that, replied Kennedy. You're coming with me, he added as they walked away. Mike, cuffed and secured by a policeman, looked at Sheila and Kennedy as they walked away. The patrol found its way back to Tulsa Police Station. Kennedy and the policeman driving the red Ford Jeep, Detective Ronnie Leatherman, entered the interrogation room where Sheila was already waiting for them. I know yesterday something happened at Jacob's apartment, so tell me what happened, Kennedy said, starting the conversation. Sheila admitted she and Mike were at Jacob's with her cousin, his wife, and one of Mike's friends. This is about what time? Asked Kennedy. About 3:30 or 4, replied Sheila aptly. I and Mike had a fight, but I left, she continued. Mike and his friend stayed behind. She stopped. What do you know about the shooting? Leatherman finally asked. He was sitting at the corner the whole time, noticing what was going on. She said last night she learned Jacob was dead. Kennedy lost his patient. Be straight with me, he said at the top of his voice. Mike said he doesn't want me there, she replied. Did Mike tell you he shot Dave? Asked Leatherman. No, sir, she responded, keeping her cool. I know Jacob ended up grabbing him by his throat, and he ended up pushing the door away and... Is that the time something bad happens? Asked Kennedy after noticing her silence for some seconds. Yeah, she replied. So, Mike told you that much. If you don't tell me what happened, you'll be getting yourself into a big SHT. Mike utters those words angrily. Sheila wanted to reply, but she ended up crying instead. Jacob's got a dog, and the dog bit him. So, I guess the bullet missed. Sheila finally said something. Kennedy was stunned, sitting on the chair, and Leatherman was already on his feet. The two couldn't say a word. Instead, they left the interrogation room, leaving Sheila behind. I don't think she's telling us the whole truth, Leatherman commented. To know what Sheila was holding back, the team sent in Sean Duff. Sean Duff had known Sheila for years. She knew Sheila as a victim of addiction, and later on she realized she had been socially abused by Mike. She didn't blame her for her choice of boyfriend but pitied her. Duff entered the interrogation room. She met Sheila face down. "What happened?" "I had you down here and I came to find out what's going on," said Duff, being concerned. Sheila raised up her head and said as she cried, "I wasn't there. If they found out you're saying something else, they will send you to prison." Duff whispered, "Do not defend somebody else that F. King hurt you." She continued, "I know, but he's the guy I loved," answered Sheila. Before Kennedy and Leatherman interrogate Mike, Watson checked up his criminal history. He found out that Michael Bowen was once convicted for carrying a firearm without a license. "Mike, Sheila has told me her side of the story. I will give you the opportunity to tell your side of the story, because there are two sides of the story," Kennedy said as he and Leatherman went in to interrogate Mike. Mike said he wasn't there at all. "That was a different story from what Sheila told me," Kennedy said. He later agreed he was there. "I was just like, yo, get rid of it. Who knows what the hell he did with it?" Mike spoke as though he was uninterested. The detective got his friend's number. "What are the odds of me going home?" he asked. "To be honest with you, probably not good," replied Kennedy. Kennedy and Leatherman left. Another policeman came in and cuffed Mike. He then took Mike out with him. After reasoning on the issue, the team identified it as first-degree murder. They found Mike's friend. He has been interrogated. He gave the team every info they asked for. Later, he was permitted to leave. Mike was sent to life imprisonment for first-degree murder, and Sheila handed 8 years for felony. Kennedy then called Jacob's mom and updated her on the progress so far. 8:08 p.m. in Tulsa, Oklahoma. A caller called 911. 911 operator. "Do you need police, fire, or medical?" Caller. "Police." The caller said he is at the corner of 54th Street and Johnstown. He said he just heard a gunshot after an argument, and the argument stopped after the argument. 911 operator. "How many gunshots did you hear?" Caller. "Just one." The 911 operator said he will inform the police. A few minutes later, another caller called 911. 911 operator. "This is EMSA. What is your emergency?" Caller. "I was just walking up the street and I look up in the driveway and I saw a guy sitting in a chair with a gunshot wound to his head." 911 operator. "Is there more than one wound?" The caller said he just saw one that is coming out of the man's head. 911 operator. "Okay." Caller. "God." 911 operator. "Is he still breathing?" Caller. "Yes, he is still breathing." 911 operator. "Just keep talking to him. Tell him you've got help on the way." Detectives made their way to the crime scene. They found a man lying wounded with gunshot wounds. "Is he bleeding via a gunshot wound?" a detective asked. "Yes," another detective answered. Detectives said the victim is in grave condition. He should be taken to St. John's Hospital. For homicide detectives, their chance of solving a murder is cut in half if they do not get a lead within the first 48 hours. Detectives are heading to North Tulsa. There was a black male that was shot at the front of his residence. Health officials have been working on him, and detectives just got a word that unfortunately, he died at the hospital. Victim seated in his chair, a detective asked. "Yeah," someone replied. He said apparently when they were out there, he had a hospital bracelet worn with the name Sydney on it. "The victim did," a detective asked again. "The victim did," he replied. 55 years old Sydney Ray was born and raised in Tulsa. After earning a bachelor's in communications, he served in the Army for a year and a half before being honorably discharged. When he returned home, he attended truck driving school and worked as a landscaper. He was survived by his mother and 3 children. A detective said he believed that Sydney was shot. He said he was shot once. He said the bullet didn't pass all the way through but stayed in his head. Sydney was shot once on the right side of his head. A detective at the crime scene said he is not seeing any blood spatter on the wall or anything. He said what this tells him is that Sydney was probably leaning forward when he was shot. In the course of searching the crime scene, a detective saw a 9mm casing and 2 different types of cigarettes. "So, who else lives in this house?" a detective asked. No one answered the door. Another detective replied. A female detective at the crime scene said she has talked to the person that owns the house. She said the owner of the house told her that Sydney and two other people lived in the house. She said she gave her the name of the two other people. "Perfect," a detective answered. Patrol learned that Sydney's housemates have been out of town for 4 days. What this shows is that Sydney was at home alone when he was shot. Only the neighbor who called 911 would be able to provide some information that can give detectives a lead. Detectives have a witness. She said she hears Sydney arguing with someone moments before the shooting, but she didn't hear what they were saying. She said she heard the suspect talking to someone. "Like shoot him?" a detective asked. "Yeah, just like that." She said after that, she heard a gunshot and everything just went quiet. She said she looks out her window and she saw two black males. She said one black male and the other she can tell who he is. She said the suspects fled to an open garage next door. She said they were only there for a couple of seconds. After that, they came out down the driveway and entered a white car. She said the suspect car did not start. She said she saw him grabbing a tool to start the vehicle, and they took off and go through the west. "How did the garage door get closed?" a detective asked. "That's a $1 million question. We do not know how it got closed," another detective replied. Detectives knocked on the door of one of Sydney's neighbors. "What do you know about this house next door?" a detective asked. "I do not know anything about it. I just know the neighbor. He is always outside fixing on his car," he replied. "What does he normally drive?" the detective asked again. "He drives a blue Mustang," he replied. "Have you seen any white cars there before?" the detective asked again. "No," he replied. "Do you know the name of the guy that lives next to you?" the detective asked again. "No, I don't," he replied. He said it's a young couple that lives there. The detective asked him if he knows the victim's name. He said he doesn't know him either. The detective asked if he has seen a neighbor associate with the victim before. He replied in the affirmative. The detective said he was going to leave his number with the neighbor. He told him to call him if he happens to hear something. The detectives think they might have to search the garage. They cannot search it immediately, though, because they need a warrant from a court of competent jurisdiction. 2 hours in, Sergeant Brandon Watkins speaks to Sydney's brother and sister-in-law who were away on vacation. They said they heard from a neighbor that Sydney was shot. Sergeant Brandon told them that Sydney was taken to St. John's Hospital after he was shot. But unfortunately, Sydney died. Sergeant Brandon asked them if they knew anybody that Sydney was having any kind of trouble with recently. They said they do not know anyone Sydney was having any kind of trouble with. Sergeant Brandon ended the call after thanking them for speaking to him. Sergeant Brandon told other officers that Sydney's brother and sister-in-law told him that Sydney was shot in his chair at that residence on the 15th of May last year. He said they made him know that it was two young guys that shot him then. They said he was shot in the back and stomach then. Another detective said their story has explained why Sydney had bracelets on his wrist. He said Sydney's brother said he couldn't let him stay in his house because he was throwing trash in the neighbors' yards, and he was aggressive with everybody. He said there was a lady who said yesterday, or the day before yesterday, the guy that was sitting in the chair out there started screaming at her. The guy told her to get out of his sight. While the team waited for a search warrant to search the victim's house and garage, a detective said someone just showed up at the house. He said they might be able to get a waiver. "Do you live here?" a detective asked him. "Yes, sir, I do," he replied. "Do you mind signing a waiver for us to search your garage?" a detective asked. "Yeah," he replied. As officers searched the garage, they began to see different ammunitions. They found 5 guns, including a 9mm Luger and a cock gun. The detectives believe they may have found the weapon used for the murder. The owner of the house swore that he does not know these ammunitions exist in his garage. A detective said he will send the ammunitions to ballistic for investigation. The detective asked him if his garage door was up. He said no. He said his garage door was not open. The detective asked again if there is any way they can get into his garage door. He said the back door doesn't lock. The detective told him that he has talked to a couple of his neighbors, and they said he has associated with the people next door. He said he is a mechanic, so he always works on their cars. The detective asked him about the guy that drives a white car and sits at the front that needed to jumpstart before he left there tonight. He said he doesn't know what white car the detective is talking about. Listen, these cats were in your garage. They probably dumped the murder weapon off in your garage. I want you to think about this. Who have you seen over there? And what kind of activity have you seen over there? The detective asked him. He said honestly, he did not see any activity over there. He said he doesn't associate with anybody. He asked for the detective's number so that he can call him when he sees any activity going on over there. Another detective suggested that Dylan be taken downtown. He said the detective should apply some type of pressure on him and see if he will stick with the story he told them initially. The detective said what the guy said made no sense to him because if it was one gun they found stashed in his yard or under a trash can, it would have been understandable. But the numerous guns found in his yard suggest he still has a lot to say. The detective who had a chat with Dylan said his interaction with him suggests to him that he was believable. He said he has been wrong before. So, if the other detective suggests he should be taken downtown and interrogated more, then they should go ahead and do it. A detective went to the Dylan door again and knocked. Immediately he came out. The detective told him to put on his shirt, his shoes, and bring along his phone real quick. As soon as they arrived at homicide, Dylan was taken to the interrogation room for questioning. The detective said he appreciates his coming down to homicide. He said he knows it sucks. Dylan interjected quickly and told the detective that he can have his phone if that is what he wants. The detective asked him if he doesn't have any issues with him looking at his phone. He said he doesn't. He said the detective can go through his pictures and his contacts. Another detective came into the interrogation room during the interrogation. The detective that was talking to Dylan gave the detective Dylan's phone, and he told him that Dylan has permitted them to check his phone. He said he has permitted them to do whatever they want to do with his phone. The detective continued his interrogation while he gave the phone to the detective that joined him. He asked Dylan about the guns that were found in his garage. He said, "Is there any way that Dylan's fingerprint or DNA is going to be on those guns?" He said no. How do you know that? The detective asked again. He said he hasn't touched any of those guns, so there is no way his fingerprints will be on the guns. The detective asked him again if any of his neighbors have entered his garage before. No, he replied. The detective asked Dylan if he received any phone call this evening from anybody that suggested the person was going to hide something or put something in his garage. He said no. The detective asked again if he hung out with any black guy at his house. He said not really. The detective said the reason he is asking is because of a picture he saw on his phone. The guy stood up to show him the picture. The picture showed he was with a guy in his garage. The detective asked if he knows the guy. He said yes. He said the guy in the picture is his buddy. He said his name is Skylar. The detective asked him when the picture was taken. Dylan said the picture was taken a couple of weeks ago. He helped the detective check the exact day the picture was taken. Dylan gave the detective Skylar's full name and says he helped him work on his truck. The detective asked Dylan if he was expecting anybody in his house this evening. No, sir, he replied. The other detective who was checking Dylan's phone left the interrogation room. He left Dylan and the detective that was interrogating him from the start. Immediately the detective left. Dylan said he was expecting to go home and eat his damn tacos and go to bed. The detective said he was going to take Dylan's fingerprint, and that way he can compare it to any prints that are going to be on those guns. The detective asked Dylan if he doesn't have any issue with taking a DNA swab. Dylan said he doesn't care. The detective left the room and told Dylan that he will be right back. The detective that checked Dylan's phone said he was not feeling him. He said he feels if Dylan knows anything, he would have told them. Detective Reggie asked the detective that interrogated Dylan if he mentioned a black male known as Skylar. The detective said he did. Detective Rogers said he blew that up. Detective Reggie himself made his way to the interrogation room to interrogate Dylan. Detective Reggie: "Hey, you look tired, man. Let me ask you something. Is Skylar your friend?" Dylan: Yeah." Detective Reggie: "You said he is a black male." Dylan: "Yeah." Detective Reggie: "Okay. Where does he live? Do you know?" Dylan: "Out west. We go to school together." Detective Reggie: "What school?" Dylan: "Central." Detective Reggie: "How old is Skylar?" Dylan: "I'd say 27." Detective Reggie: "Okay." During the interrogation, Detective Mark Kennedy received a call from Dave. Dave went through Dylan's Facebook page and found the Skylar he was talking about. The information on Dylan's Facebook page shows that Dylan is a white male. Detective Mark shows Dylan the picture of the white male. "That's Skylar," Dylan said. Detective Mark: "That's not the guy in the picture that you identified as Skylar. That was an older, bald, black man." Detective Mark: "So, are you ready to tell the truth now?" Dylan: "Okay, that's the neighbor." Detective Mark: "Out by your garage?" Dylan: "Yes. He helped me push my truck out." Detective Mark: "Who is the neighbor?" Dylan: "His name is Reggie." Detective Mark: "Do you know Reggie's last name?" Dylan: "No, I don't." Detective Mark: "Which house does he live at?" Dylan: "I've seen him next door, next to me to the left." Detective Mark: "Like the one that the murder happened?" Dylan: "Yes." Detective Mark: "Does he live over there?" Dylan: "I don't know who lives there." Detective Mark: "Okay, but Reggie frequents that house next door." Dylan: "Yes, sir." Detective Mark: "Why didn't you tell us that?" Dylan: "Because he is in the picture and I didn't want you guys to think that I was hiding anything." Detective Mark: "But you are." Detective Reggie: "We know you are scared to death right now." Dylan: "Oh, I am scared to death right now." Detective Reggie: "We know." Dylan: "You guys see this right now?" Detective Reggie: "We know that." Detective Reggie: "All my partner is trying to do is to get out why they did what they did. He is trying to solve a murder, bro. Somebody lost their life today." Dylan: "I know, buddy. I want somebody to find out who shot them." Detective Reggie: "But if you mean that, you are going to start being truthful to us, because talking to you is like pulling teeth." Detective Mark: "You are making it worse for yourself. Leave the fear out of this. Stop the fear." Dylan: "Okay. So, I was not at work today. I was inside for about 95% of the day. I decided to go outside and roll a blunt. I opened my garage door. I heard boom. It was a bang. I stopped rolling the blunt. Reggie came over and threw the guns. He threw the gun underneath the toolbox. I saw Reggie and a black guy. I said, 'What are you doing?' He said, 'I want to hide them. Sidney just shot himself.' I said, 'Dude, I am getting out of here.' He ran out. I locked the doors. I got in my car and I left." Detective Mark: "What did the other guy look like?" Dylan: "He was a black guy. He is tall, skinny, black skin." Detective Mark: "What you just said now at 1:52 in the morning is a whole lot more than what you have said at all. Hope you know what I mean." Dylan: "All right. I apologize, guys. I'm just scared." Detective Mark: "Well, you should be scared. You made me look like a fool because I believed in you." Dylan: "Give me a minute." Detective Mark: "Sit tight." Detective Mark came out of the interrogation room after he chatted with Dylan. He narrated what happened in the interrogation room to other detectives. Dylan identified Reggie. He stated that Reggie said Sidney had shot himself. He said that is unlikely based on the fact that there was a loud argument that was going on before the incident happened. The team searches for Reggie on Dylan's Facebook page. Here it is the detective who searched said. He found a picture that looks like the guy in the photo from Dylan's phone. He found Reginald's last name. His last name is Sutton. 54 years old Reginald Sutton has multiple felony convictions including burglary, drug possession, and shooting with intent to kill. Detective Mark went back to the interrogation room, where Dylan has been held. Detective Mark, who is this? Dylan, that's Reggie. Detective Mark, you are saying that's him? That's Reggie. Dylan, yeah. Detective Mark, are you sure? Dylan, yeah. Detective Mark left the interrogation room and returned to his team members. He said Dylan identified the guy in the picture as Reggie. He said that means they have a lead. Yeah, that means we have to find him. And that car is still running around somewhere. Another detective said. Then, the team gets body cam footage from first responders to the shooting. While the team was watching the video, they saw an officer walking down from the crime scene. They also saw a white Monte Carlo that has broken down in the video. The car broke down while trying to leave the house. A detective said that car is probably the suspect's vehicle. The video showed where the officer was asking a young man if the car belongs to him. The young man said the car is his cousin's car. The young man said he was going to get gas. The officer asked how long has the car broken down. The young man said it broke down 30 minutes ago. The officer asked if he heard or seen something around where his car broke down. The young man said he did not see or hear anything. The officer told him someone has been shot around the place that his car broke down. The detectives who watched the video are convinced that the guy in the video does not look like Reginald. They said probably the young man is the second guy they are looking for. The detectives are convinced that the car in the video is the car they are looking for. Detectives said all officers should be on the lookout for the white car. 17 hours in, Detective White gets the autopsy report. White said the autopsy reveals that it was as if someone was coming from the back and putting it up against his head and pulling the trigger. He said he was going to take what he has to the district attorney's office, and he will see if they can get a warrant for the arrest of Reggie. Detective Watkins gets a call from Sydney's family. She said they are sure that Reggie has something to do with the death of the victim. They said that Reggie is part of their family. Reggie and Sydney are first cousins. He said the family is saying that Reggie is hiding somewhere in the out east. After some minutes, Detective White got a phone call from the district attorney's office. He said they have been able to secure an arrest warrant for Reggie. With an arrest warrant in hand, the team hits out the east of Tulsa searching for Reggie Sutton and the white Monte Carlo. The team hits all the streets in the east, but there was no luck. After hours of searching, Reggie turns himself in. Reggie was taken into the interrogation room for questioning. Detective White, I know you are going through a lot right now. Reggie interjected. Well, Mr. White, the first thing I had to do was to turn myself in and do the right thing. Detective White, that is a good decision. I appreciate that because that shows me a lot. Detective White, tell me about what happened last night. Reggie, okay, it was my cousin, Sydney Ray. I was over at the house. Sydney Ray does crack and he gets on it and starts fighting people, chucking bricks at people, cursing people. He's kind of crazy, you know. So, I said this is my first cousin. First of all, Mr. White, let me let you know, his mother and I are sisters. He started yelling and woofing, and that's how he does. So, I say, chill my cousin. You can be doing people like this. You yell at everybody that comes into this yard. After some few minutes, he pulled a 9mm out. I said, I'm your cousin, man. Are you going to do that to me? So he sat back down and sat in the brown chair he was in. So he started doing it again. That was when I walked up to him. So he took a knife and hit me on my belly. So he took the gun out. I said, are you going to do that to me like that, man? So we started dragging it. It went off. Detective White interjected. Reggie, it went off, sir. Detective White, you know I have interviewed a lot of people out there last night. Some of the people I interviewed lived in that area, and they said it was not only you that was up there. They said there was another male that you were with. I am interested in knowing who he is. Who were you with? Detective White asked again. Reggie, Terry Ratliff. Detective White, I need to find Terry because he could corroborate your story. Do you know his number? Reggie, I don't have a phone. I do not know it by heart. Detective White, is he the one? Did he leave in the car? I mean the white Monte Carlo. Reggie, yes. Detective White, where is the car right now? Reggie, it should be at his mother's house. Reggie gives the location of Terry's mother's house. Reggie, I'm letting them know about the car. A few minutes later, a detective said Detective Warren has found the car. He said when they went and knocked on the door to get permission to tow it off the property, a guy answered. The guy that answered was Terry. Terry agreed to talk and he was brought to homicide. When Terry got to homicide, he was taken into the interrogation room for questioning. Detective White and Detective Kansas Corps entered the interrogation room. Detective White, just tell me the truth, that's it. Terry, I'm fixing to tell you. Terry continued. He said Sidney was right there. He said when Sidney smokes some dope, he usually gets irritated and starts talking a little noise about people. He said Sidney got up in Reggie's face at one point in time, and Reggie also got up in his. He said before he knew it, Sidney was sitting down, and Reggie was all over him. He said Reggie was getting ready to whoop Sidney. He said Sidney scratched him a little bit. He said Reggie came to him and showed him a scar on his stomach. He said that was when Reggie told him to hand the gun over to him. He said he didn't want to give Reggie the gun, but Reggie intimidated him. He said he handed the gun to Reggie. The next thing he knew was Reggie shot Sidney in the head. Detective White, okay, that's it. Terry, he murdered that dude. Detective White, that's the part I need to know exactly clear about. So how did he do it? Where was he standing when he did it? Detective White asked again. Terry, right over him. He grabbed the gun, went back over to Sidney, and stood over him. He backed him back. Sidney was still talking then. Detective White, what was he saying? Terry, he was saying shoot me, shoot me. Terry said the next thing he heard was a gunshot. Detective White, where did he shoot him? Terry, it was on the right side of the head, I guess. That's all I know. Detective, Sidney wasn't fighting him or doing anything. Terry, Sidney was a good guy. He didn't deserve to die. Terry said. After that, Reggie said he better not say anything to anyone. He says Reggie told him to hide the gun in Dylan's garage. He said he grabbed the gun. He said he took it up and pits it up under the tool chest. Detective White, when you reached under there to get rid of that gun, did you see any other guns? Terry, I didn't notice any. Detective White, where did you go from there? Terry, I tried to leave but the car didn't start. He hopped in the car with me. He said Reggie said they needed to get away before someone calls the police. He said Reggie said he should stay. Reggie shot himself if anyone asked. Terry said he told him they were going to detect that he didn't shoot himself. He said they ran back to Dylan's house and Dylan drove them to a gas station to fill up a gas can. He said when they came back, they dropped him off the car. He said he saw the police walking towards the car shining a light on it. He said the police asked if the car belongs to him. He said he told them they went out to fill the car because it ran out of gas. He said he got the car started and he immediately went to his mother's house. He said he stayed right there till morning. Detective White, I'll be right back. You can hang here real quickly. Detective White returned to the interrogation room, where Reggie was being held. Detective White, well, the version that we got from your friend over there was a little bit different from yours. Reggie, how far was I off? Detective White, quite a bit. Detective White, Here is what I think happened based on the version that he told me. I do not doubt that Sydney has got some issues. I think we can agree on that. Reggie, yeah, we can. Detective White, I've heard about how he is kind of so forth, and I think he was probably running his mouth to you and being disrespectful. Reggie interjected. He showed the scar on his stomach to Detective White. He said that was when Sydney stabbed him. Detective White, that was what pissed you off. Reggie, pissed the out of me. Detective White, then, you decided to handle it, and it went too far. Reggie, yeah. So, what will I be charged with, Mr. White? It could be no self-defense for what he did to me, could it? Detective White, no, I don't think so. I think that it raises it to another level. Reggie, I understand. Less than 24 hours after Sydney was murdered, Detective White solves his case. Reginald Sutton subsequently pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter and was sentenced to 25 years. Ballistics testing confirmed that a 9mm pistol in Dylan's garage was the murder weapon. None of the other guns found in the garage were determined to be involved in the murder. Dylan later admitted to helping Reggie and Terry flee the scene. Dylan and Terry were not charged in connection with the case. 9 months later, Sydney's family remembers him. How many murders happen every day across the globe? Is it the police or the government's fault, or the blame goes to someone entirely different? What do you think? When it comes to crimes, there's a lot of questions, but not so many answers. So many unsolved crimes, so many lost people that were never seen again, so many broken hearts left. This story begins on a very cold night in January, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Life is so unpredictable, even at 1:45 a.m., when you must be warm in your bed having your best sleep, excited for what tomorrow brings. Little did we know that the world would wake up with terrible news, other murders. 3 people were murdered, a 58-year-old black male called Kenneth Sellers and a 52-year-old woman along with her 28-year-old son. Where can we start? Just like every crime story, even this story begins with a 911 call. On the north side, a man in the neighborhood where the murders took place heard a woman screaming and noises of gunshots. He decided to call and explain what he heard. After some time, the police arrive at the place where the shooting happened. They decide to not waste time and get in the house as fast as they can, in case someone needed help. Unfortunately, there were 3 victims. When the police got in the house, they noticed that the victims weren't standing in the same room when the murder happened. It looked like they died exactly where they were before the tragedy happened. Almost like execution style, said the police officer. However, each of the victims has a name, each of them has a story. The first victim was standing by the door, the youngest one, the son of the mother, a 28-year-old, named Thomas. He attended Central High School in Tulsa. He was self-employed. He was shot in the chest and his head. The second victim noticed was murdered in the hallway, the 52-year-old woman, shot in her chest. The house was owned by the mother and her son. They lived together. The 58-year-old victim, called Kenneth Sellers, was the last one to be seen by the police. He was murdered in the bedroom of the house. He was on his knees next to the bed. He, too, was shot in the chest and his abdomen. We can surely say that Kenneth and the woman might have been in a relationship together. His sister confirmed it and told us that he was staying there for a whole week. Kenneth Sellers was born and raised in Oklahoma. He worked as a welder for over 10 years. He came from a big family, the youngest of 5. Kenneth, unfortunately, leaves behind 6 children and 9 grandchildren. I'm pretty sure he is very missed. When the police arrived at the house, they noticed that both doors were open. The front door of the house and the back door of the house. The back door of the house didn't look like it was forced to be opened. It seemed that the one that got in pretty easily and knew his intentions. The house was in terrible condition. It's quite the mess, Sarge, says the police officer. In the back of the house, the bedroom had been tossed. The killer, who came into the house, was for sure looking for something he knew that it was there. Perhaps something he owned, something that was borrowed from him. There were clothes, blood everywhere. The drawers were out. What were they looking for? There were a bunch of empty plastic bags on the floor. I guess they took for what they were looking for, drugs. There was some blood in the bed, in the pillows. There is a casting there too, said the police officer. Detectives believe that the young 28-year-old victim was shot in the right side of the bedroom, then he ran out of there while rubbing up against the wall as he is going. The wall had blood prints, then he ran over to the living room, where he collapsed and died there. As they were going around the house, the police officers saw that there were castings all over the house. There were 9mm shell castings. As the team was searching for fingerprints and DNA samples, the rest of the team got informed that the neighbor that had called 911 that heard someone scream so loud, that was the 28-year-old victim's girlfriend. She was already transported downtown to be asked questions about this tragedy. She might know something. She might even be the killer itself. We're about to find out. The girlfriend of the victim has a child, a 5-year-old, a daughter. She left the child to her sisters to babysit. She was the first one to get questioned about this whole situation. The police hoped that she would say something useful. And there she was. She looked scared. She was shaking. Her voice was shaking. The first thing that came out of her mouth was, "Why? Why did they do that to my baby?" She was talking about her boyfriend, the young victim, Thomas. The only thing she seemed to care about was if they are dead or not. She goes, "Can I ask you one thing? Are they dead?" And when the police confirmed that they are dead, she busted into tears immediately. The officer said, "I'm sorry for your loss, but we don't even know what relationship you had with the victim." She explained while crying that they had been dating a couple of months and that he used to sleep multiple times over at her house. That night the victim was staying at her apartment. The officer said, "What happened?" She started telling things in detail, as if the victim has said to her, "I want you to go with me so we can go get stuff from the house." The girlfriend said no because it was too late. They had to lay and sleep. But the girlfriend said that she does her washing at the victim's house. She said she washes her clothes and her baby's clothes there. So, she had to take some laundry from the victim's house and agreed to go without asking too much. The 28-year-old victim, Thomas, told to his girlfriend that his friend Melvin is coming too. The police officer asked her about this guy named Melvin. She said they were friends. Well, that they recently became friends. She says that Melvin used to always steal from her boyfriend, the victim. She says he came to her apartment. The police officer asked her about her daughter and who she was at the moment with. She said she left her child with her sister and her sister's boyfriend, saying that she isn't her blood sister, but she stays directly right across the hall from her apartment. The police officer asks, "So this Melvin comes at your apartment, picks you and your boyfriend, and you go where?" She answers with no hesitation, "We get in the car, me, Melvin, and my boyfriend. There was some other dude that I've never seen before," she says. Detective Mark Kennedy asked her, "What was the purpose of this ride? Tell us." She said that she had no idea. She didn't ask a question. She had to take some laundry and that's it. She says, "Sir, it was my only opportunity. I don't have a car." However, she continues with the story. "We arrived at the house. We go right around the corner to 29th, where the shooting happened. The first to get out of the car was my boyfriend. In the car, it was only me, Melvin, and the other unknown guy. The other guy that I didn't even know who it is, not even his name, left the car too." She says Melvin was in the front seat, and she was in the back seat. She says they were taking so long. All of a sudden, Melvin speaks on the phone with someone and says that he had to go and take his girlfriend. It sounded so fishy, like something bad would happen. She didn't believe it. She said to Melvin that they should wait for the others. He started the car, but I insisted and said no. She started screaming and saying, "No, take me back to go and take my man. What are you doing? Why would you leave them?" He wasn't even responding. He just drove to the corner of the street and came back. At this moment, she knew something bad is gonna happen. Or at least something bad just happened, but she didn't know yet. She said that it wasn't even a minute, that they just looped. And we go back at the front of the house. I go in the house and see that. She says, boom, he goes off and I see that. I walk in the house to that. By that meaning she saw what happened. Officer goes, "So, who is the killer?" She goes, "The man that went out of the car." But she had no clue who that was. The only things that she said were, he had a black hoodie, he was brown-skinned, Melvin knows him. The police ask her about Melvin. Who is he? How old is he? And much more. She tells that Melvin is between 2 to 6-year-old. He stays in Gilcrease Hills with his dad. She says that she doesn't know Melvin's last name. This information was so good for the police and for the family's victims that deserve to know who is the killer if the girlfriend is being completely honest. Detective Diana Bauman decided to search for a man named Melvin in Gilcrease, a man in his 22nd that is living in the Gilcrease Hills neighborhood. Luckily, they did find a possible match, a photo so they can show it to her and see if Melvin is the one that we're looking for, the possible killer. He is Melvin Porter. The detective shows to the girl a picture of Melvin and asks her, "Who's that?" And she immediately recognizes him. She says that he is the one that she is talking about. The investigators ask her, "Let's go back to the beginning. Tell us the previous story that Melvin and the victim had." She says that probably a week and a half ago, the victim, her boyfriend, gave Melvin $300 to buy him a gun, a 9mm handgun. But Melvin never gave him the gun. He kept the gun for himself, and this is why they had fallen out. She believes that everything started because of this argument between Melvin and the victim. Everything about the gun. So, when did they make up? They asked her. They had made up and become friends on the same day that the victim was shot to death. She said because apparently, Melvin gave back everything he owned to the 28-year-old victim. The investigators asked her if her boyfriend sold drugs. She told the police that the victim used to sell drugs. "I know he previously has. He just did 17 months for that," she says. They asked her about what kind of drugs he sold. Marijuana, cocaine, but she didn't know. As Detective Mark Kennedy was talking with the girlfriend's victim, some of the police officers also went to her house to check out her child, only to find out that she had left her child alone in her house and lied about it. Her daughter is only 5-year-old. How can you leave a child alone at home with everything that's going around the world? Since she lied about this, what about other stuff? Can we trust her? Is there more to the story? Detective Mark Kennedy asked her about his daughter, and she admitted to leaving her child at home but insisted that everything she said was true and she could be trusted. She felt sorry for leaving her daughter alone in the apartment. The Petrel went into searching for the 25 Melvin Porter in Gilcrease Hills, hoping that his story is gonna match with the girl's story. This was a brutal crime that 3 people died from it. "I want to know who did it," says Detective Mark Kennedy. 3 hours later, patrol radio hits with the news that they found him and arrested him for drug trafficking. He had drugs, meth. He had 37 grams on him. It was time to hear Melvin's story. Detective Mark Kennedy introduces himself to Melvin and starts asking him questions. Melvin seemed so chill, not nervous at all, saying that he had nothing to do with the triple homicide and that he hadn't been there that night, only some hours before, but not when they were shot to death. He tells that he was there that day, at the victim's house, and told who it was there, his friend, his mom, and Thomas's mother's boyfriend. He says that Melvin and the victim were childhood friends. Melvin explained what kind of car he was driving, Ford Focus, what hour, and where he went next. When the police told him about what the victim's girlfriend told him, he just laughed and said that it wasn't true. Melvin said, "That's stupid. I don't care what she said to you all. I wasn't with her that night." He doesn't seem to like the victim's girlfriend. The detective notices and asks him what's your problem with her. He kept saying how she always used to steal from the victim, how she always used to be high on drugs, how she always used to stalk behind the victim's back. The detective asks Melvin if he has ever bought a gun for the victim, as the girl said. But Melvin said no. He said that he bought the gun for himself. "Where's the gun?" asks Detective Kennedy. Melvin said that he took the gun to clean it, saying that he has the receipt too. The detective asks him when was the last time he was in contact with the victim. He says that it was that day of the death of the victim and that he called him asking for drugs, for some weed. "But that didn't happen. What about the meth you had today with you?" asks Kennedy. "Did you take that from him?" "No," says Melvin. The police don't know what to believe anymore and time was running fast. Detective Mark Kennedy asks for evidence for a surveillance video of the victim's girlfriend's apartment. He might find a video of the entrance of her apartment. But then Detective Bauman goes through Melvin's phone and finds some very helpful texts. They discover a text that he shared with the 28-year-old victim, saying, "Bro, what's taking so long?" Does that mean that the girlfriend's victim was right? Melvin was there waiting in the car that night right outside the victim's house. The detective asks Melvin about this text and he says that he meant it for today. That they talked about finding him drugs but it didn't happen. Melvin still gives nothing. No clues. The girlfriend's victim gets arrested for child neglect. Melvin gets arrested for drug trafficking. But there's still a third person that we don't know who he is and what he did yet. Maybe he is the answer to all this messy big puzzle. They decided once again to look closer to Melvin's texts. Nowadays you can find a lot about a person through his phone. CPL Nathan Schilling discovered that Melvin texted someone that day before midnight saying, "Need a gun," hours before the murder happened. We're getting closer to finding out, I think. The same person that Melvin texted, that person texted back hours after the murder time saying, "I need some clean clothes, bro." His name was Christopher President. This person got some explaining to do. It seemed like he is the shooter. Investigators do their work, and they find a pic of Christopher President. Some information. Christopher President, a 27-year-old black man, was charged with a lot of stuff: burglary, drug possession, and much more. A father, has a son, a wife, a family. The investigation in Melvin's phone continues. They find that after the shooting, that night, Melvin has searched on Google about news about this case and downloaded a police scanner app. Melvin has been lying all this time, meaning that he is guilty of something. Is Christopher President the shooter, and Melvin's just a getaway ride? Getaway of a cold, brutal murder. All of this progress was made within just 48 hours. 2 days later, the videos of the girlfriend's victim's entrance apartment were sent to the office. Melvin said he never came to the girlfriend's house, so let's see the truth. And there it was, Melvin's car, a Ford Focus, just like he said, matching the same time frame. The girlfriend's victim was right all this time. Melvin was at her house, picking up both the girlfriend and the victim, then driving to the house where the shooting made place. The video was clear. Melvin wasn't who he said he was. 1 month into the investigation, the officers decide that they have enough proofs to charge Melvin for murder. He was still in jail for drug trafficking. It's his last chance to tell us exactly what happened and all about this Christopher President guy. So they went to Osage County Jail and Sheriff's Office, where he was being held. The detective started asking questions. Melvin still kept denying it. Nearly 3 weeks later, Margaret Hain Bell, Tulsa PD, discovered by locating the locations of both Melvin and Christopher's phones around that same time when the murder took place, and found out that these two were together that night at the victims' locations. 1 month into the investigation, and they decide that it is enough evidence and decide to arrest Melvin. Now it was time for that detective Mark Kennedy to collect the DNA of fingerprints and the samples of the crime scene and see if it would match with our wanted Christopher President. After 2 weeks of searching for Christopher, the gang unit found him at his mother's house, arrested him for an unrelated outstanding warrant. The detective started to ask him questions, and after that, he would serve Christopher with his DNA buccal swab. He seemed nervous. They asked him about that the night of January 16th. He said that he has known about this case since his friend was arrested. His friend is Melvin. He knew the 28-year-old victim too, saying that he was friends with him too, that he was been at his house several weeks before he got shot to death. When asked if he was with Melvin that night, Christopher said no. He said that on the 15th of January, hours before the murder, his girlfriend gave birth to a boy. He was at the hospital. Melvin called just to say congrats to him, so Christopher asked for some drugs, pills, or something from Melvin since he got anxious about the fact that he became a father. He couldn't sleep. It helps with my anxiety, he says. So they went to a bar. They went to a bar near his mother's house, near the victim's house. After the bar, Melvin drove him back to the spittle, by his car, a Ford Focus. The detective asks about where he spent the rest of the night, and he says at the hospital. But his phone tells a different story. Christopher is making up a whole other story, so the investigator tells him the GPA coordinates, everything, and that night he was near the victim's house. The detective decides to call the lab and make the case even stronger. To see if his DNA profile matches, they asked him to open his mouth so they can take pieces of his DNA. After some time of waiting, the lab found no matches with Christopher's DNA. Kinda disappointing. However, the investigators put everything together, every piece of evidence, and the court decided to charge Christopher President with murder. They decided there was enough evidence. Christopher President was convicted of 3 counts of felony murder and 1 count of armed robbery. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Melvin, on the other hand, was convicted of 3 counts of felony murder and 1 count of armed robbery. He was too sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. The 28-year-old victim's girlfriend pleaded guilty to child neglect and was sentenced to a 3-year suspended sentence and probation. However, she was not charged in connection with murders. The victim's girlfriend was a very big help in this case. This was a very brutal crime that has come to an end finally. This happened only because people are greedy. Greedy for money, drugs, for having things that don't belong to them. So greedy that sometimes they forget the value of life. How precious life is. How can you take innocent people's lives? People shouldn't suffer. Their life shouldn't end for others people wants. But who is to blame really? Police, government, people, you choose. 10:02 p.m. in Mobile, Alabama. A call came through to 911. The 911 operative answered the call and asked what the emergency was. The caller said she is on Michigan Avenue. She said someone just hit his car and the person kept going. He said they are chasing behind them as he is talking. The 911 operative asked her if she has the tag number of the car that hit them. She said they are not close enough to get the tag of the car. She said they are trying to run. She said they are trying to turn into a dead end right now. She told the 911 operatives to get some policemen there. She said they had turned their lights and everything off. A few minutes into the chase, the car that hit them stopped, and the caller's husband gets out trying to speak with the person that hit their car. The 911 operative was still on phone asking the caller what was happening. She started screaming that the driver is shooting at them and her husband has been hit. The 911 operative asked her to calm down so that he can understand her. He asked her where she was now. She said she is lying on the ground, but the hit-and-run driver has fled with his car, and her injured husband is trying to follow him. She said her husband was chasing her behind the car and she was walking the path they took. The 911 operative asked her what she saw so that he can get someone across to her. She said she saw a car crash in a yard. A few minutes later, police and EMS arrived and found that the caller's husband was shot multiple times. They attempted to revive him, but he could not be saved. For homicide detectives, their chance of solving a murder is cut in half if they do not get a lead within the first 48 hours. Detective Glenn Barton will lead the investigation. He briefed detectives that they got a call at about 22:07 of shots being fired. He said they arrived at the scene at 22:10 and found the 911 caller, who is a longtime girlfriend of the deceased. He said she told officers that she and her husband were in a vehicle and they got sideswiped. He said she told him that they started to pursue the vehicle. While they were pursuing the vehicle, they drove into a dead-end area. He said the secondary video they have revealed that the victim got out of the car and the guy driving the vehicle started firing at the victim. He said the victim got back in his vehicle and he came to rest at that location. Detective Nettles said the caller is at the police headquarters as they speak. Detective Glenn Barton said the victim's name is Patrick Edwards. Born and raised in Mobile, 35 years old Patrick Edwards was trying to start a landscaping business and was a partner in his family's barbecue food truck. He leaves behind a loving family and 2 sons. Patrick was shot twice to the chest and once to his left arm. The detectives agreed that the victim's car should be towed and searched for evidence. The detectives found blood, broken glasses, and a gold ring at the scene of the incident. Detective Glenn Barton said it will be nice if they can find out if the ring belonged to the suspect. Detective Nettle took the picture of the ring and said he will show the victim's girlfriend to find out who really owned the gold ring. In a nearby driveway, another car parked on the street appears to have been struck by either the victim's car or the suspect's vehicle. The detectives agreed that it should be towed to the yard too. CSI collects shards of plastic from a taillight. Detective Glenn Barton said what they have looked like a road rage situation. He said he will talk to the fiancé of the victim who saw it firsthand and try to get a better understanding. Detective Glenn Barton and Detective Julius Nettles returned to the headquarters to interrogate the victim's wife. When he entered the investigation room where the victim's fiancé was, he introduced himself and Detective Nettles. He consoled her, and he said he knows she will be going through a lot presently. He said he just wants her to tell them as much as she can remember about what happened. She said they were on Michigan Avenue headed towards the interstate, and a car came up. She said the dude hit them and then speeds up. She said the car hits them on the side like it was going around. She said it was like the car was flying and was trying to zip. Detective Nettles asked her who was driving the vehicle at that time. She said it was Patrick that was driving. She said Patrick told her to call the police and they started following the car. She said they pulled up to the dead end and the car was sitting there with all lights turned off. She said they got out of the car and Patrick told him that he just hit their car. She said the window of the dude was up. She said the dude shot like 3 or 4 times out of his window. Detective Nettles asked if she heard glass break. She said they saw how the glass got broken. She said she started running trying to find somewhere she can lay down. She said he heard Patrick telling the dude that he shot him. She said the dude backed up and Patrick got back in the car and went behind him. She said the dude shot like 3 or 4 times again. She said when she got got up, the dude was gone. She said when the dude left, she saw her car with the lights on. She said she ran over to Patrick and he was bleeding close to the truck he was seated. She said a few seconds later, she saw some policemen and she flagged them down, and they came over there. She said that was as much as she can remember. Detective Barton asked her what the car of the suspect looked like. She said it was white or silver Nissan Versa or Sentra or something like that. Detective Nettles asked her if the car intentionally hit them. She said she doesn't think the car intentionally hit them. Detective Barton asked her if she was able to see what the guy looked like. She said he was a white guy with a low haircut and he had a beard. Detective Nettle asked him how old did the guy look to her. She said the guy looked between 25 to 35 years. He asked if she was able to get the plate number of the car, but she said she couldn't. Detective Barton showed her the gold ring they found at the incident scene and asked her who owned it. She said the ring is for Patrick. Detective Barton told her he was going to allow her to go. He said he will inform her as soon as they have new information. While detectives were looking at the scene of the incident on their computer, a detective noticed that there were many gas stations around the scene of the incident. He told Detective Barton that one of those stations should have the video of the incident. 4 hours in, Detective Barton and Detective Nettles arrived at a gas station in the area where the hit and run happened. The clerk pulls up surveillance video from around the time of the 911 call. 1 minute after the 911 call came in, the victim's Nissan Armada chases a small sedan. Detective Barton downloaded the surveillance video to review with the homicide team. 5 hours in, the team could not determine the make and model of the suspect's car. Detective Barton reached out to the cyber unit with the hope that they can track down more video of the suspect's vehicle. Barton told the cyber unit that they have the video of the actual day. He said it could be a G6, but he is not 100% sure. He told the cyber unit that the car was driven by a white male. He told them to send him whatever they got through an email. When he dropped the call, he told his team members that he needed something that will make him identify who the white male was and the type of car he was driving. The next morning, while detectives wait to see a cyber who can come up with anything, the team returned to the crime scene to canvass the neighborhood. At a house down the street, a detective got a video in the house of a lady. The video showed the suspect's car first. After that, there was a brief pause before the victim's car appeared. A few seconds after the victim's car appeared, it went out of frame. Then, the suspect's car appeared with lights off. The detective said the car looks like a light gray car. 15 hours after Patrick was gunned down, Detective Barton met with traffic homicide investigator John Mixon and crime scene investigator Jason Bullock, hoping to find evidence that will help identify the suspect's vehicle. Mixon went ahead and brought the lens for broken pieces, and he wants to compare them to the Armada. He said if the taillight doesn't match, investigators may be able to identify the type of car it came from. When he did, the pieces fit the Armada, which meant that the investigators could not get a lead from the car. With no leads from the damage to the victim's car, the team turns to the car that was struck on the street. Fragments of paint on the car could reveal information about the car that hit it. When they carried out the test, it showed that the paint appears to have come from the victim's car. 1 hour later, the search for more videos paid off. Detectives got a break. They got a very clear video of the suspect's vehicle before the shooting. 1 minute before the accident, a surveillance camera captured a silver Toyota Corolla driving behind the victim's car. He said it was consistent with what they were looking for. Detective Barton follows up with the unit that uncovered the video. Detective Barton asked them if they could track the vehicle. They told him that they were already doing that. He said he got them, but they haven't come up with a tag yet. They said not definitely. The cyber units were able to get a partial plate number from the video, and they have seen searching for a match. They said they will send anything they get to Detective Glenn Barton. 40 minutes later, the team found a silver Toyota Corolla registered to a man who matches the suspect's description using the partial plate number. His name is Trenton Thornton. 31 years old Trenton Thornton has no prior convictions. Trenton was a former Marine who did 2 tours in Afghanistan. Detective Barton said they will go to the area and try to put their eyes on the vehicle. A detective said the vehicle should have a lot of damage to it. He said if they see the vehicle, then they will take the suspect into custody. Detective Glenn Barton said he would be lying if he didn't tell the team that he is reserved than usual about confronting someone that is well trained like the suspect. He said the suspect has seen real combat and you have in the back of your mind if he has PTSD or if he is dealing with some serious trauma. He said all his actions indicate that he is very dangerous. He said he was going to send out the address, and then if they put their eyes on the vehicle, they will just hit the house. Detective Glenn Barton and Detective Julius Nettles, backed by several members of the homicide team, headed out to Trenton's last known address. They passed the house, but they didn't find the silver Toyota in the driveway. They decided to knock on the door to check if the suspect was at home. With no answer to the door, Detective Barton approached a neighbor. He asked the neighbor if he could give him their phone number. The neighbor gave Detective Barton the phone number of Trenton's mother. The neighbor told detectives that Trenton lived there when he was growing up before joining the military. Detective Barton asked the neighbor about the personality of Trenton. The neighbor said Trenton has never done anything really bad. He said he just does stupid things. Detective Barton thanked Trenton's neighbor and left for his car. While they were walking to the car, Detective Julius asked Detective Barton what he was going to do with the phone number. Detective Barton said he would either call Trenton's mom or talk to her if she could get her son to come in, or they could get an address from 2016 other than the one they came to. 20 hours in, the team heads to the second address they found for Trenton. While they were in the car, Detective Barton said when someone is military trained, it is a whole mother ball game. He said they have to take every precaution because they don't know if he is going to be armed to the teeth, and they don't also know his tactics. He said it's just another level to an already very hard job that they have. While Detective Barton was talking to the team members in his car, he received a radio signal from other team members in another car that it appears the vehicle they are looking for is in the front yard. They also said that it appears that the vehicle has damage to the driver's side of the front window. The detectives came down from their vehicle and made their way into the compound. Detective Barton and Detective Julius went to the door while other detectives took strategic positions in the compound. A few seconds after Detective Barton and Detective Julius knocked on the door, an old woman answered. She was Trenton's grandmother. Detective Barton asked her if Trenton was in the house with her. She said she had no idea where Trenton was. Detective Barton told the old woman that if Trenton is inside, then she needs to tell them because they need to talk to him. Detective Barton asked Trenton's grandmother the last time she saw him. She said Trenton came in around 3:30 p.m. Detective Barton shouted on top of his voice asking Trenton to come out if he is in the house. A few seconds later, another member of Trenton's family came out. Detective Barton asked her where Trenton was. She told him Trenton was probably sleeping. Detective Barton asked her about the room Trenton was in. She said Trenton was sleeping in the room on the far left. Detective Barton asked her if Trenton had weapons in his room. She said Trenton has weapons. Upon hearing that, Detective Julius shouted on top of his voice telling Trenton to come outside and surrender himself to the police because the house is already surrounded. Detective Barton asked Trenton's grandmother if she has his number. She said she doesn't have his number. Detective Julius said Trenton's phone number is in the paperwork in the truck. Detective Julius told another detective to take the position of Detective Barton while he goes to the truck to search for Trenton's number. A few minutes later, Detective Barton returned with Trenton's phone number. He called the number several times, but Trenton, it was not good. Then, he called Trenton's mother. He told her that policemen have surrounded the house of her son, but he is refusing to come out. He asked her for Trenton's phone number so that he can talk to him because Trenton was in an unsafe situation. Trenton's mother said she was driving, so she cannot pull up his phone number, but she agrees to help the detectives get Trenton out. A few minutes later, Trenton's mother arrived at his house. Detective Barton told her she cannot approach the front door because of her safety. He said he wants her to call her son and let him know that they are policemen, and they are there for investigation. When Trenton's mother called him and it wasn't going through, Detective Barton told her to text him. He said she should tell him that she is with the police. Trenton's mother sent him a text pleading with him to come out. He replied to his mother that he was coming out. Detective Barton told all officers to be on the alert. A few minutes after he replied to the text, Trenton came out. He came out through the front door. While he was walking outside, Detectives Barton told him to raise his hands so he can see them. Trenton eventually came out with his hands up. He was handcuffed by Detective Barton and Detective Julius and taken into their vehicle. While he wanted to enter the vehicle, he told Detective Barton that he will like to pee when they get to a convenient place. Detective Barton asked him why it took him very long to come out. He said he was dead asleep. Detective Barton applauded all officers. He told them they have done a very good job. He said a couple of hours ago they didn't have a good shot of the vehicle, and now they have the suspect and the vehicle in custody. He said the vehicle matches everything the witness said. He said he was pretty happy. After he applauded the officers, they all made their way back to the headquarters. When they got to the headquarters, Trenton was taken into a room for interrogation. After some few minutes, Detective Glenn Barton and Detective Julius Nettles entered the interrogation room where Trenton was being held. When he entered, he introduced himself and introduced Detective Julius too. Detective Barton said he is sure Trenton knew and saw what went down at his house. He said he knows Trenton knew what all that was about. He said he just want to get some of Trenton's information before they start talking. Detective Julius asked Trenton where he works. Trenton said he is a self-employed construction worker. He said sometimes he works at a welding place doing landscaping. Detective Barton asked Trenton if he has any sort of military training. Trenton said he used to be with the Marine Corps. Detective Barton asked him how long he worked with the Marine. Trenton said he worked with the Marines for 4 years. Detective Barton thanked Trenton for his service. Detective Glenn Barton said he doesn't want to waste Trenton's time. He said he wants to talk to him a little bit. He said he wants to ask him some little questions. He told Trenton that he is not under arrest. He told Trenton that he is detained. He said he is being detained so that they can talk for questioning for an investigation. Detective Julius Nettles told Trenton that the only reason why he was handcuffed is that he didn't come outside right away. Detective Barton asked Trenton if he was cool with him asking some questions. Trenton said he will hear what Detective Barton has to say, but he might not say anything back. Detective Julius Nettles told Trenton that the deal is that they are going to have a conversation with him, and he is sure Trenton knows why they were there. Detective Nettles said honestly and truly, he thinks there is an explanation for it. Detective Nettles told Trenton that they take people's rights very seriously. He said there are two things. The first is either Trenton doesn't want to talk to them or he doesn't want to talk to them without an attorney. He said it has to be that plan. Trenton said he was going to wait for an attorney. Detective Barton told Trenton to give them some minutes, and he left the interrogation room with Detective Julius Nettles. When they got outside, Detective Glenn Barton put a call through to the assistant DA and presented his case. He was able to secure a warrant for Trenton's arrest. Detective Glenn Barton and Detective Julius Nettles returned to the interrogation room where Trenton was being held. When they entered, Detective Glenn Barton told Trenton that he has been charged with murder. He told him that he cannot talk to him much about it. With 25 hours left in the first 48 hours, Trenton Thornton was charged with Patrick Edwards. Detective Glenn Barton said he wants to know Trenton's side of the story. He said he wants to know what he was thinking. He said unfortunately, he doesn't think he can get to hear Trenton's story. He said he thinks Trenton lost it. He said he thinks he was probably enraged or upset. He said Trenton might have some PTSD. He said it's very difficult to tell with Trenton because he had no emotion. He said even when he told Trenton that he has been charged with murder, he just said okay. He said he thinks Trenton just got confronted and didn't like what was about to happen and shot the victim. Trenton Thornton has been charged with murder and he is awaiting trial. When officers brought Trenton out, journalists asked him if he has anything to say concerning the crime. Trenton said no comment. He said he has nothing to say. After Trenton was driven off, Detective Glenn Barton reached out to Patrick Edwards' girlfriend. He told her that they have arrested a suspect in Patrick's case. Patrick's girlfriend could not hide her joy as she kept thanking Detective Glenn Barton. Detective Glenn Barton told her the name of the suspect is Trenton Thornton and he is going to be booked in jail for the murder of Patrick. The next morning, the team searched Trenton's bedroom for the murder weapon. The team found a handgun, military grade along with a military-grade handgun, rifle. Detective Glenn Barton said these are two weapons capable of committing homicide. He said it's hard to know because they do not have any casings. He said he is hopeful that they will get a casing in the vehicle when they search it. He said they were going to match it and see if the ballistic comes back to being fired from the guns they saw in Trenton's house. He said Trenton had enough firepower. He said he had ammo for days. He said he just thanked God that it didn't go a different way. The search of Trenton Thornton's vehicle led to the discovery of several bullet fragments, but no casings. Ballistic tests on the fragments were inconclusive. The murder weapon is yet to be identified. 1 year after Patrick's murder, Patrick's brothers and his son gathered at a river where Patrick used to fish. They said it was what Patrick likes to do. Patrick's son said fishing with his dad was one of his favorite moments. He said he wasn't ready when his dad left him. He said he thinks about his dad every day. 11:37 p.m. in Tulsa, Oklahoma. A caller put a call through across to EMCA. As soon as the EMCA operator picked the call, he asked the caller about her emergency. The caller said her son has been shot. The operator asked the caller if her son has any serious bleeding. She replied in the affirmative. The operator told the caller to stay on the line because they already have an ambulance coming her way. Within a few minutes, the Tulsa police unit arrived at the house of the caller. They introduced themselves and the caller immediately let them in. She took them to where her son was lying. A detective asked her where the boy was shot at and she showed him. The detective noticed that the boy got one bullet to the chest and exit to the back. For homicide detectives, their chance of solving a murder is cut in half if they do not get a lead within the first 48 hours. Detective Jason White, who has been in the unit for more than 10.5 years, will lead the case, which is his 80th case. Detective Jason began his investigation immediately. He jumped into his car and headed to an area in the northwest part of the city in Osage County. He was told that the victim was shot in the driveway but managed to make it inside the house. The victim suffered gunshot wounds to the chest, arm, and leg. Doctors were unable to save him. He died of injuries. When Detective Jason White arrived at the scene of the incident, he asked Detective Ronnie Leatherman, who was among the first respondent to the incident, if they have any information. Detective Jason Leatherman said they have gotten the name of the victim. He said the name of the victim is Kim Hayes. 26 years old Kim Hayes was born and raised in Tulsa in a close-knit family. He worked for an industrial manufacturer and just celebrated his daughter's first birthday. Detective Ronnie Leatherman told Detective Jason White that they have gotten a search waiver signed by the mom. Detective Jason White asked him if the mom stays there. Detective Ronnie said the house belongs to the mom. He said the mom and the victim's girlfriend live there. The detective said they saw blood trails everywhere. They found a blood trail on the side of the car and down the garage. Detective Jason asked him where the victim was found. He said the victim was found in the house. Detective Jason himself joined the detectives in the on-site investigation. When they moved to the garage where the detectives told him they found blood trails, they found a .380 gun with bloodstains on it. Detective Jason said it might be the victim's gun. A detective said maybe. When they walked down out of the garage, they found 5 casings scattered across the driveway and into the street. They also noticed that all the cartridges of the casings were .380 seconds. Detective Jason White asked if the victim has a phone. The detective told him that the victim's phone is in the driveway. He told him that he has a password for the victim's phone. The password is slime. Detective Jason White said it's an interesting password. When they took a walk further down the house, they saw a pill bottle. The name on the pill bottle is Charles Boas and it's hydrocodone. Detective Ronnie said hydrocodone is an opioid pain medication that is commonly sold on the streets. Detective Ronnie said that according to the neighbors, there has been a lot of foot traffic and vehicle traffic from the house recently. He said it's probably drug-related. Detective Jason White said he is going to holler at the witness next door. He went to the neighbor and introduced himself. He asked the neighbor what he saw. The neighbor said he was about to go to bed. He heard some argument outside and he looked out through his window. He said he saw the victim and 2 other guys tussling on the driveway. Right at the end, He said he heard gunshots which took his heart rate and everything up to a different level. He said the guy that was standing over the victim unloaded like 5 or 6 rounds and pointed blank over the victim. Detective Jason White asked him what the victim did next. He said his wife thought she saw him get up, and he think he was able to return fire. Detective Jason asked him what the guys looked like. He said they looked African American. They were tall. One was probably about 61. He said it wasn't the first time that he has heard people coming in and out. Detective Jason White asked him if there has a lot of traffic in that apartment. He said there has been a lot of traffic over the last year or so, but he thought since he had a baby, he has cleaned some things up. Detective White thanked the neighbor and went back to his team members. He told his team members that what he understood from what the neighbor said is that 2 guys were fighting, and the suspect was over the top of him. One of the suspects was shot into him multiple times. He said he calmed down or something after he had a baby. Detective Jason said the victim's mom and girlfriend will be taken downtown. He said he wants to talk to them and get their story as quickly as possible. When they arrived at the homicide headquarters, the victim's mom and his girlfriend were taken into different interrogation rooms. Detective Jason told Detective Ronnie that he thinks they should talk to the girlfriend first because she will probably have more information than the mom. When they entered the interrogation room where the victim's girlfriend was being kept, Detective Jason White introduced himself and introduced Detective Ronnie Leatherman. Detective Jason White said he is sorry that she is going through all of this. He said he wants her to shed some light and help him out on the murder. He said he wants her to tell him what happened tonight. The victim's girlfriend said it was like every other night. They had a night routine with their daughter. She said their daughter ate dinner at around 7:45 and they laid her down. She said when it was time to lay her down, they lay down together. She said as soon as their daughter fell asleep, Kim hopped up and left the room because he was already texting someone while they were laying their daughter to sleep. She said Kim went straight to the garage and opened the garage door. She said she went to the bathroom to grab a cigarette and she went out because that is what she does. She said suddenly she heard loud noises. She said she knows what a gunshot sounds like. She said heard up to 9 gunshots. She said the gunshots came repeatedly. She said at that point she knew Kim was in trouble. She said she opened the door and Kim started yelling, "Get down! Get down." She said she heard the shots and all she saw Kim do was just dart to the threshold of the garage door and just over and over. She said that was when she noticed blood and Kim immediately turned around and looked at her. She said he was telling her to call the ambulance. She said blood was coming out of his mouth as he was coming down the stairs. She said she went and grabbed towels because his mom met them at the stairs. She said she grabbed a towel and she applied pressure on the wound. She said she placed his head on her lap and she kept hitting him as hard as she could. She said every time he closed his eyes, she kept telling him, "You're strong, you can do this. You're dumb, you've done this before." She said he was shot 3 times in the stomach last year. Detective Ronnie asked Kim's girlfriend what he was doing on his phone before he went to sleep. She said she asked Kim who he was texting and he told her it was his friend Charles. She said she told him that she has never heard that name before. She asked him who is Charles and she asked him what was going on. Kim said Charles was supposed to bring him some Roxy's to sell. Detective Ronnie asked her what Roxy's are. She said Roxy's are OxyContin. She guessed. She said Roxy's was one of the main things that Kim sells. Detective Jason asked her if Kim told her that Charles was coming with somebody else. She said he did not. She said when he was shot and his head was on her lap. She said she kept asking him Charles' last name. She said Kim kept trying to say something but she couldn't understand what it was. She said she kept asking him Charles who, and he said Charles Boras. She said now she knows his bows. Detective Jason asked her how she knew. She said she messaged a childhood friend of Kim. She said they went to school together when they were kids. She said they all went to Central together. She said Kim's friend told her that Charles Bose is an old friend from high school. She said she was trying to put it together in her head just because she is familiar with living a very bad lifestyle before she got pregnant. She said she changed her lifestyle around. She said Kim did too for the most part. She said right after they had their baby, she and Kim went from being close friends to being lovers. She said Kim gave her a promise ring before their baby turned a year old. She said they were on their way to getting to know their place. Detective John commended her for being extremely strong because she has helped them with her statement. Detective Jason White turns to Kim's mother. He asked her what happened that night. She said she was downstairs watching Longmire. She said she just heard some rat-a-tat-tat Bangs. She said the next thing she knew was they were coming in the front door and Kim was saying he has been shot. Detective Jason asked her if she heard Kim talk about who shot him. She said she did not. He was just in a lot of pain. Detective Jason asked her if she knows anything about what Kim has been doing or if he has a lot of people come over for various reasons. She said no because there is a lot she doesn't know. She said she doesn't know what her son has been involved in. But he promised her that he was not involved in anything. She said she is not saying he is innocent or not, but Kim was doing fine because he was working every day. Detective Jason asked her about her relationship with Kim's girlfriend. She said they are good. She said she was homeless when she picked her and brought her to her house. Detective Jason said she has to be strong for both Kim's girlfriend and her granddaughter. He said she will be living in her house temporarily. She said no problem. She said her focus is KH low. She wants to know when she can see him. Detective Jason said she cannot see him in the medical examiner's office. She can only see him in a funeral home. He said he cannot imagine what she is feeling right now, but his goal is for justice to be served. He said she should not hesitate if anything comes up. Using Kim's password, Sergeant Nathan Schilling scanned through his text messages leading up to the murder. He said the text message showed that Kim was bringing a pill bill. He had concerned about whether they were real or not. Kim said he has a baby now, so he isn't playing any game. He said he is a number guy and as long as the numbers stay straight, they are going to eat. The person that was coming to meet him replied to Kim that what did he mean because he is confused. The person said they are real and there is no press. Kim told him he wants to know when he is pulling up so that he can raise the garage door. Detective Jason asked Sergeant Nathan that what time did the text come in. Sergeant Nathan said it was around 10:51 p.m. He pulled up at 10:52, 10:53 bet. He said that was his last going. Detective Jason said that's the guy. Sergeant Nathan said the number the victim was having a back and forth with who was going to deliver pills checks to Charles Bowes. Detective Ronnie pulled up a picture of Charles when he was arrested last year. 27 years old Charles Bowes is a local rap artist and has no prior felony murder convictions. Detective Jason said they know that Charles Bowes was there. His pill bottle was on the street. He said they have to build a case up. He said he wants to be able to arrest the cat. He said there was another guy that was him too. Detective Ronnie said they may have to watch a body cam. Detective Jason hopes body cam footages from first responders will turn up a lead. He said if the video shows the victim mentioning that name, he thinks they are good from that. Detective Ronnie finally got the officer's body camera video uploaded. He said they are going to watch it and see if the victim gives any more details about what happened. When they watched it, they saw where the victim mentioned the name of Charles Bowes. Detective Jason said it's a powerful piece of evidence. He said he thinks it falls under the category of dying declaration. Detective Ronnie said, with a dying declaration, the person who's dying will have to talk to them and tell them there is a good chance he was going to die. He will be asked if he understands what he was saying and the person will say yes, he is about to die. But this is the person who did it. Detective Ronnie said if it passes through those stages, then it can be used as evidence in court. He said hopefully they will be able to use it as a dying declaration. He said he doesn't think it is going to be an issue as far as getting Charles Bowes arrested. He said there was a pill bottle where the shooting happened that had his name. Also, he was the last person Kim was talking to. He thinks that they have plenty piece of evidence to get him. Detective Jason said they will put everything together the next morning, and they will submit it to the DA so that they can get an arrest warrant. Detective Ronnie said there is still the question of the second person when the shooting happened. He said just because Charles was there doesn't necessarily mean he was the shooter. He said it could be the other guy that they do not know about. 38 hours after Kim was murdered, Detective Jason said they have gotten the warrant signed for Charles Bowes. He said he has notified the Fugitive Warrants Unit to start the hunt for Charles Bowes. The team headed to several known addresses for Charles Bowes, but one after the other, they came up empty. In the first 48, Tulsa Homicide responded to the murder of Kim Hayes, who was gunned down in his mother's driveway. Detectives learned that an eyewitness saw two men struggling with Kim before one of them shot him. They discovered that Kim made a dying declaration naming Charles Bowes as one of the suspects, but they have been unable to track him down. 18 hours into the search for Charles Bowes, Detective Jason said the fugitive warrant guys said they have been setting up surveillance on the potential house where Charles Bowes may have been staying. They have set up surveillance in that location and apparently they have followed him to another location. He said they have him spotted. He is presently sitting in a car. He said they are maintaining surveillance at the moment. The fugitive warrant finally arrested Charles. Detective Jason said whether he is the shooter or not, they will probably get to know. He said Charles doesn't seem like somebody that is a criminal type. Detective Jason said he wants to know who the second guy is, and he is hopeful that Charles Bowes will tell him. Nearly 3 days after Kim was murdered, Charles Bowes was brought to homicide. As soon as he entered homicide headquarters, he was taken into an interrogation room for questioning. Detective Jason White immediately moved to the room to interrogate Charles. When Detective Jason entered the room, Charles was lying on the floor. Detective Jason told Charles to sit up. Charles disagreed. He said he wants a lawyer. Detective Ronnie entered the investigation room and told Charles that they need his fingerprint and his DNA. Detective Jason told his team members that Charles said he wouldn't speak to them. Detective Ronnie said the witness who lived next door saw some sort of a physical altercation. He said if you look at Charles' hand, it was taped up. Detective Jason commended Detective Ronnie for good observation, and he told him he was going to photograph that. Detective Jason said Charles will have to be transported to Osage County. When the detectives that were going to transport Charles entered the interrogation room, they saw him doing something. The detectives asked Charles what he was doing. Charles said he was spelling something out. When he was taken out, detectives went to the room to see what Charles was spelling. They noticed that he spelled out innocent. Detective Jason White said the evidence they have does not support that right now. With no leads on the second suspect, detectives headed back to Kim's neighborhood with the hope that they will get someone in Kim's neighborhood that might have the surveillance video from the night that he was murdered. They looked at all the videos of the people in Kim's neighborhood, but they didn't get anything. 2 months go by without any leads, and then detectives got some welcome news. Detective Jason told his team members that they will go to Pawhuska to visit Charles Bowes. He said Charles' attorney reached out and indicated to them that Charles was willing to tell them the story. Detective Jason said he thinks Charles has seen that the case against him is incredibly strong, and he doesn't have much of a choice than to try to have a little self-preservation. Detective White and Detective Ronnie Leatherman headed to Pawhuska in Osage County where Charles Bowes has been held. When Detective Jason met Charles, he introduced himself, and he told Charles that his attorney reached out to him that he wanted to tell them the story about what happened. Charles claimed Kim put him in touch with a man who was going to buy his prescription drugs. Detective Jason asked Charles how he got played. Charles said he gave Kim some pills, and he gave him an envelope with some napkins in it. Detective Jason said, and he left before he realized that he has been screwed over. He said yes. Detective Jason asked him how much they were talking about that his buddy ended up taking him for. Charles said it was like $600 or $700. Charles said, so he hit Kim up to tell him who the dude was because he was going to beat him up for scamming him. He said Kim didn't want to give up the dude because he didn't want to be in the middle of it. Detective Jason told Charles that there is a lot of messages on Kim's phone between the both of them about pills. He said both of them were discussing a transaction. Charles said it wasn't a transaction. He said he told Kim that if he gets the dude over there and lets him get on one-on-one with the guy, he will let him have the pills. He said he told Kim that he set him up. He said he told Kim that they have known each other for a long time. He shouldn't have done what he did. He said after that, he punched Kim and they started fighting. He said he ended up slamming Kim on the ground. He said Kim had his arms locked into where he couldn't move his arm. Detective Jason said what happened after that. Charles said his cousin pulled him off Kim. When he pulled him off Kim got up and started reaching like he had something. He said then he heard shots go off and he took off running. Detective Jason asked Charles that who was his cousin, that kinfolk that came over there with him. Charles said his name is Lawrence. Detective Jason asked Charles if his cousin was worried after the incident happened. Charles said he knew he was worried because he knows he is not that type of dude. Charles said it was like some type of situation, but he hopes he didn't screw his cousin up. Detective Jason asked Charles if he knew that Kim died. Charles said he didn't know until 2 days later. Charles said he didn't know anything happened because Kim was popping back. Detective Jason thanked him and he left. Back at Homicide, Detective Jason told his team members that he thinks Charles was minimizing some of his involvement. He said he identified his cousin as Lawrence Mitchell. Detective Charles said he is going to pull up Lawrence Mitchell. 23 years old Lawrence Mitchell performed local gigs as a rapper. He has a previous conviction for possession of a firearm. Lawrence was arrested 4 months after the murder for failing to appear in court on an unrelated firearm charge. Detective Jason said they will try to talk to Lawrence. Lawrence was transported from Tulsa County Jail down to Homicide. Detective Jason said it took a lot of time to get the warrant issued for him because of COVID and other things. He said once that happened, they went down to the jail to go pick him up. He said he hopes that Lawrence will tell them what's up. Detective Jason and Detective Ronnie went into the interrogation room to have a chat with Lawrence. When they entered, Detective Jason told Lawrence that he knows his cousin and he has spoken to him. He said he just wants Lawrence to tell him what happened. Lawrence said he would never have left the room out of his house if Charles didn't call him. Detective Jason asked Lawrence that who was the person that called him. Lawrence said his big cousin Charles Bowes. He said he got a call from his cousin asking him if he can ride with him. He said Charles also asked him if he can bring the pistol. He said he asked Charles what he needed the pistol for. He said Charles said he just needs his help. He said he got into the car with Charles, and they went over there. He said he was in the car when he heard some altercation. Detective Ronnie asked Lawrence if he knew the background of the altercation. He said he just knew the altercation was over some pills. He said he thinks Charles owed Kim some money. Detective Jason asked Lawrence if Charles owed Kim some money or vice versa. Lawrence said vice versa. Lawrence said Kim took of Charles, telling Charles that he wasn't paying him. Lawrence said he was sitting in the car looking at them as they were fighting. He said he was like they will soon be done. Lawrence said the fight went on for like 7 minutes. He said he got out of the car and he told his cousin that they need to break that up. He said it was that time that the neighbors started coming outside. He said he told his cousin that they should get out of there. He said he told his cousin that he has a pistol on him and he doesn't want to get caught because he is already fighting a case. He said Charles let Kim go. As soon as he did that, he upped on him. He said he asked his cousin what he was doing. He said Charles told him that he was threatening with a pistol. He said Charles shot. He weaved. He shot again and he weaved. Then he shot him. Detective Jason asked Lawrence how many times he shot. Lawrence said he doesn't know, but it was like 4 times. He said he already had mines out before Charles drew. He said when Charles drew the shot, that was when he emptied his. Detective Jason asked Lawrence if he ever spoke to Charles after that. He said Charles came the next day. Charles was like he can deal with it. He said he felt bad. It shouldn't have ended that way. Lawrence said he takes full responsibility. He said his cousin has a whole lot of family. He said he didn't have to talk to them, but he was just trying to get the heat off his cousin. Detective Ronnie told Lawrence that he has a lot of respect for him for stepping up to do the right thing. He said he wished Lawrence had done it in May. Lawrence told Detective Ronnie that he fell in love. He said he doesn't want her to know what's going on because he didn't want to put her in this situation. He said he was trying to bond out and get married because he didn't know what it feels like. He said now he has to tell her what's going on for real. Detective Jason appreciated Lawrence for being kind and left the interrogation room. Charles Bowes was charged with first-degree murder and he is awaiting trial. Lawrence Mitchell was charged with first-degree murder and possession of a firearm. He is awaiting trial. The First 48 Hours, Season 22, Episode 3, A Beautiful Life. Story based on ND, public news reports, and police reports. At exactly 9 a.m. in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a caller called 911 to report an emergency. When the 911 operator answered the call, he asked the caller if she needed police, fire, or medical. The caller said he needs police and probably medical. The operator asked the caller for his address. The caller said it's behind a field 129th of McDonald's and Admiral. The operator asked the caller what was going on. The caller said a kid lying in the middle of a dirt road. He said the victim is a teenager and he is lying face down. The 911 operator asked the caller if the teenager is moving or breathing. The caller said he is not moving and breathing. He said he thinks the teenager is dead. Detective Chase Calhoun, Detective Jason, and other team members headed to Tulsa. Detective Chase told his team members in the car that they received a call from an unknown person. He said the caller stated that they found a body next to a dirt road in the woods. Detective Jason said it's Detective Chase's first case, and he has to prove to them why they chose and initiated him. When the team arrived at the dirt road, they found the teenager lying face down just as the caller said. Detective Chase said the teenager should be 15 or 16. He asked the first respondents if they have gotten an ID for the teenager. They said they haven't. The detectives noticed bloodstains on the leg and back of the teenager's head. They also noticed that the teenager's pocket was turned on. Detective Jason said the pocket been turned on maybe due to the grabbing of the teenager's cell phone by his killer. Detective Chase asked the first respondents how long has the teenager been dropped there. Detective Jason said he thinks it's not more than a day. While detectives waited for the medical examiner, Detective Chase Calhoun spoke to the 911 caller. Detective Chase asked the 911 caller if he lives there. The 911 caller said he lives in his van. Detective asked the 911 caller if he was just cruising through the dirt road when he found the teenager. The caller replied in the affirmative. He said he was just on his way out when he saw the body lying there. Detective Chase asked the caller that when was the last time he drove through there. The caller said yesterday. Detective Calhoun asked him what time. He said 11:30 p.m. Detective Chase asked the caller if he saw the body when he drove through there the last time. He said he didn't see the body. 2 hours in, the ME discovered that the teenager was shot once in his chest. They also saw foam which the ME said could be from the inside of the car of the suspects. They noticed some marks on the body of the teenager. The ME said it looked like the boy was drugged and swabbed on his wrists and his ankles. The ME said DNA swab will be tested to look for trace evidence of a suspect. They will also take his prints back to the lab. Detective Jason said they should take photos of the victim's shoes and necklace. He said the photos will stand out for somebody. Detective Jason said the case is challenging, especially as it is the first case for Detective Chase. Detective Jason said once they find out who the teenager is, it will be 300 more pieces to the puzzle. He said after that, the family will be on board, and they will start finding out and getting leads. Detective Jason said the case will cause outrage because the boy is too young. Back at Homicide, Detective Chase Calhoun got an update from the crime lab. The crime lab was not able to identify the teenager by his fingerprints. Detective Jason said they should release the photos of the victim's shoes and necklace to the media. He said he hoped they will be able to get a lead if they do that. Detective Chase was also monitoring the city of Tulsa's 911 calls to see if anybody will call in about a missing person. The photos released by the team lead to a broadcast. An hour after the broadcast, a woman called in. She said her fiancé's little brother, 16 years old Darren Wilson, has been missing since last night. Sergeant Walker, who was the detective that answered the woman's call, asked her if the victim had a Facebook page. The woman said the victim had a Facebook page in his name. When detectives searched for the victim on Facebook, they found a picture that was consistent with his eyebrows, hair, height, and weight. Detective Jason said the picture they pulled out of Facebook has to be the victim. After the search, Sergeant Walker reached out back to Darren Wilson's family. Sergeant Walker asked the victim's family if there is anyone that can identify the victim from a picture. The family members said Darren's loved ones are gathered at his mother's house. Sergeant Walker said they will be on their way to the victim's mother's house. After a few minutes, the team led by Detective Calhoun arrives at the house of the victim's mother. Detective Calhoun met Darren's sister-in-law Lajani Wilson and showed her the photo of the victim. Immediately she saw the picture, she started crying. She told Detective Chase that the person in the photo is Darren Wilson. Detective Chase consoled her and other family members. He said he knew what they have been going through since the victim was declared missing. The 16 years old Darren Wilson is known to friends and family as Dada, attended East Central High School, where he played football and competed in track and field. He had hopes of going to college and playing Division I football. Darren left behind his parents and 3 siblings. Detective Chase asked Darren's sister-in-law if Darren's mom is there. She showed Detective Chase Darren's mother. Detective Chase told Darren's mother that her son was shot. He said her son was found in a field. Darren's mother asked Detective Chase if he think Darren was dropped off in the field. Detective Chase said that is what he knows. Detective Jason approached Darren's mom where she was standing and crying. He told her that they need the family. He said they need people who might have been hanging out with Darren last night. Darren's mother said he told her he was going to play basketball. Detective Jason asked her the time Darren left home to play basketball. She said it was around 5 the previous day. She said Darren told her that he was going to spend the night with his friend. And she said okay. She said Darren didn't mention the name of his friend. She said Darren only uses his phone to send Facebook messages through Wi-Fi. Darren's mother told the detectives that they have to find the people that killed her son. Detective Jason told her if there is any way to find those people, they will do it. Then, a family friend pulled detectives aside. Detective Chase asked the family friend if he knows whether Chase has been involved with bad people. He said he doesn't know. Detective Chase asked him if he knows what Chase has been up to lately. He said he just know that Darren does a lot of trading with shoes. He said Darren has been selling sneakers to make money. He said he dropped Darren a month ago. He said Darren went out of the car, traded shoes, and he got back in. He said he doesn't know whether Darren was involved in anything bad. Detective Jason told his team members that it is obvious that there are a lot of people that love Darren. He said when you meet someone's loved one who just lost their child, it's a tragedy. He said it can instill extra motivation to want to solve it. The team entered their car and headed to homicide headquarters. While they were driving, Detective Chase said the family wasn't able to get a whole lot of information. He said he wondered how Darren was getting the shoes they said he was selling. When they got back to homicide, Detective Chase told the team members that he hopes they will be able to get some of the victims' information about some possible motives as to why somebody would want to kill him the next day. He told the team that at the end of the first day, they don't have evidence and video surveillance or witnesses. He said he believes that the case is not a sprint but a marathon. He said eventually they will get to the finish line. The next morning, Detective Calhoun got a warrant for Darren's Facebook messages, hoping to identify who Darren met with the night he went missing. 26 hours in, the team got an update from Darren's autopsy. A small caliber bullet was recovered from Darren's chest. Based on the bullet trajectory, the ME believes that the shooter was standing over the victim. Detectives believe that the pieces of foam that were found on Darren's shirt were from the car he was shot in. The MEs did not find anything in the head for injuries. Then, the team got a recorded tip from the Crime Stoppers hotline. The voice in the recording said he has information on Darren. He said he thinks Darren was set up. He said just message me. After the team listened to the recording, Detective Calhoun sent a text to the tipster, and he immediately hears back. The tipster sent a message to Detective Chasing informing him that he can talk. The tipster said he was going to meet Detective Calhoun at the strip mall. Detective Calhoun and Detective Jason immediately entered their car and headed to the strip mall to meet the tipster. When they arrived at the strip mall, they met the tipster who was already waiting for them. Detective Chase introduced himself and introduced Detective Jason too. He told the tipster that they appreciate him for calling them to give them information. The tipster said Darren was a good kid. He said he didn't like the way Darren died. Detective Chase asked the tipster how well he knew Darren. The tipster said he and Darren played football together. Detective Jason asked the tipster about the stuff that Darren got into. The tipster said he think Darren was just selling shoes. Detective Chase asked the tipster if Darren was stealing or taking stuff that does not belong to him. The tipster said he thinks Darren was stealing the shoes he was selling because he was selling shoes that were worth $200 at the rate of $100. The tipster said the night before Darren went missing, he met with Darren to buy sneakers. He said after he left Darren, he went to meet a mutual friend. He said he told his friend that he got the shoes that were with him for $100. He said his friend asked him whether he got the shoes from Darren because Darren just sent him a picture of that shoe for $100. He said Darren had a plan for the $100. He said Darren wanted to buy a small gun the next day. Detective Chase asked the tipster if Darren was going to buy the gun from his mutual friend. The tipster replied in the affirmative. He said the next day he found out that Darren was dead. Detective Chase asked the tipster if he knew whether Darren met with his friend. The tipster said he doesn't know. The tipster said once he saw the description of how Darren died, he knew it was sketchy. He said he knew his friend did something with Darren. He said after he heard of Darren's death, he tried contacting his friend, but it was his mom that picked up. He said the mom told him that his friend is not there. The tipster said he thinks Darren was set up when he was trying to buy a gun. Detective Chase appreciated the tipster and told him to give him a call if he has any information. When they returned to homicide, Detective Chase told the team that they will run on the guy that was trying to sell the gun to the victim the next day. He said they are going to solve the case. He said it is his first homicide case, so it has to happen. In the first 48 hours, Detective Chase Calhoun identified a body that was found dumped in a field as 16-year-old Darren Wilson and learned from a tipster that on the night Darren went missing, he was trying to buy a gun. Now, Detective Chase Calhoun needs to track down the young man who was going to sell the gun to Darren. 3 days in, Detective Calhoun looks up the tipster's friend and found a phone number for his mother. Detective Calhoun reached out to the mother of the tipster's friend. He told her his name and his place of work. He told her that he called about her son because he wants to talk to him. She said she hasn't seen her son since the night that Darren went missing. She said she didn't know he was gone until the next morning because he had put something in his bed to make it seem like he was there. Detective Chase asked of his cell phone. The mother said they had just taken his cell phone. She said she hasn't had any communication with him. Detective Calhoun told the mother that he is going to need her help. The mother agreed to call Detective Calhoun if she finds her son. A few hours later, the mother called Detective Calhoun that she found her son and she brought him back home. Detective Calhoun told the mother that he is heading her way immediately. When detectives arrived at the house, the mother agreed that she will allow her son to talk at homicide. The detectives left the house with the boy and headed back to homicide. When they got to homicide, the boy was taken into an interrogation room for questioning. Detective Jason and Detective Chase were the detectives that entered the room to interrogate him. When they entered, Detective Chase introduced himself and introduced Detective Jason. He asked the boy if he knows why he was there talking to them. He said it's because Darren is dead. Detective Chase asked the boy that when was the last time he hung out with Darren. He said he hung out with Darren a couple of weeks ago before school ended. He said the last time he saw Darren was about a month ago, but they talked on Tuesday and Wednesday. Detective Jason asked the boy what he and Darren talked about. He said he needs him to be 100% honest with him. The boy said Darren was trying to buy a gun and he knew some people that were selling guns. He said Darren called him and told him that he has $100 and he needed a pistol. He said around 8 p.m. on Wednesday. He talked with Darren. He said he told Darren that he doesn't know if he can get the pistol, and he pushed away from the conversation about the gun. He said that was the last time he spoke to Darren. Detective Jason asked him what happened next. The boy said he heard that Darren died around 2 p.m. on Thursday. Detective Chase told the boy that it looks a little bit funny that he and Darren were talking about buying a gun, and then Darren disappeared. And he also disappeared. Detective Jason asked the boy if he understands how it looks like, and he replied in the affirmative. Detective Jason said what it looks like. The boy said it looks bad. Detective Chase told the boy that they need to figure out what happened that night. The boy said what happened that night was that he never talked to Chase again. Detective Chase asked the boy where he went to when he left his mom's house that night. He said he went over to sleep at a friend's house. Detective Chase asked for the phone number of the friend, and he gave him. Immediately, detectives collected the phone number. They stepped out of the interrogation room. Detective Calhoun called the friend to check the story of the boy. Detective Calhoun asked the friend if the boy was there overnight. The friend said that the boy was there overnight. Detective Chase and Detective Jason returned to the interrogation room after fact-checking his claim that he was at his friend's house throughout the night. Detective Chase asked him if he was familiar with DNA. He said he is familiar with it. Detective Chase said what he can do now is that he will take a buccal swab from the boy. He asked the boy if he is cool with it. He said he is cool with it. Detective Chase told the boy to open his mouth. When the boy opened his mouth, he collected the swab he needed for the DNA test. After Detective Chase took the swab, he asked the boy why Darren needed a pistol. He said he doesn't know. Detective Chase asked him if Darren had a beef with someone. He said Darren doesn't have because Darren was just one of the laid-back people. He said Darren was an outgoing type, so he had a lot of friends. He said Darren just wanted money. Detective Chase asked the boy where Darren was getting money for all the shoes he was selling. He said he doesn't know. Detective Chase asked if he knows whether Darren was hitting licks on people. He said he thinks Darren usually hit a house that has no occupant. Detective Chase asked if it was like breaking into a house, and the boy said yes. As day 3 continues, one of Darren's family members called detectives with a potential lead. He said words on the street were that Darren reached out to a second man looking to buy a gun. He said Darren met with the guy the night before he died. Corporal Nathan Schillings followed up on the lead. He got to know that the suspect is wanted in a shooting. He got to know that police had stopped a suspect couple of months ago after his warrant came out, but he ran from the police, and he has been on the run since then. Detective Calhoun called the warrant squad to try and bring the man in on his unrelated warrant. 12 more days went by with no sign of the second man that Darren tried to buy a gun from. Detective Calhoun was in his office when he got a call from the crime lab. The crime lab told Detective Calhoun that DNA from an unknown male was found on Darren's ankle, but it doesn't match the DNA of the first young man that Darren tried to buy a gun from. 15 days into the investigation and desperate for leads, an inmate from a neighboring city jail claiming to have information about the murder reached out to Detective Calhoun. The inmate claimed that the second man that Darren wanted to buy a gun from asked his father to hide a pistol for him. The inmate claimed that the potential suspect left the gun at a motel where his father stays. She said the gun could be related to the murder. Detective Calhoun hopes that they can put pressure on the father to tell them where his son is. 6 hours later, with a search warrant in hand, the team stakes out the father's motel room. Warrant's detectives spotted the father approaching his room. Detective Calhoun radioed his team that he wants a couple of guys to go ahead and get up on the door of the suspect's father so that he doesn't get back out of the room. He said he will be right behind them. As soon as the suspect's father entered the room, Detectives approached the door and told him to open his door. The team handcuffed the suspect's father and searched his room. Detectives found drugs, but they didn't find a possible murder weapon. The team arrested the father for the drugs they found in his room. Detective told the father that they will let him go if he can tell them where his son is. Detective Jason said he is hopeful that the father will shed more light on where his son is. When Detective Calhoun interrogated the father, he agrees to help detectives track his son. The dad told detectives that he was going to check back some things and get back to them. Detective Chase said he hopes the dad comes up with something concrete. 3 days after detectives spoke with the father, he gave them a location for his son. The detective met his son at the location, and they brought him in on his outstanding warrants. Detective Calhoun entered the investigation room where the boy was being held, and he introduced himself to Bai. Detective Calhoun noticed that the boy was crying, and he asked him why he was crying. Detective Chase told the boy that the reason why he wants to talk to him is about Darren. Detective Chase asked the boy if he was with Darren the night he died. He said he wasn't with him because he hasn't seen him for over a month. He said Darren was like a blood brother to him. He said he is the last person that will try to hurt him. Detective Chase asked the boy if there is any reason why his DNA will be on Darren's body. He said no. Detective Chase asked him if he will be willing to give him a swab. He said he is ready to give Detective Chase everything he needs right now. Detective Chase asked him if he knew the person that killed Darren. He said he doesn't know. He said all H was ready to tell Detective Chase all he knew about Darren. He said he learned about Darren's murder the day his body was discovered. He said that his girlfriend tried contacting him through Facebook the night before he was murdered. He said he looked at his Facebook and he saw Darren's message asking him if he knows where he can get any tools at the rate of $150. Detective Chase asked the boy about his Facebook page. He said he will give Detective Chase his password if he wants to access his Facebook. Detective Chase asked the boy that he heard that Darren has been hitting licks lately. He said that was how Darren got the shoes he sells. He said that was what he knew about him. Detective Chase told the boy to open his mouth so that he can get his swab. After collecting the swab, Detective Chase told him that he is going to jail that night because of all the warrants. He said he knew. Detective Chase left the room and took the swab to the medical lab. The second man's DNA was compared to the sample that was found on Darren's ankle, but it didn't match. Finally, 13 months into the investigation, Tulsa PD brought someone in who claimed that they heard information about Darren's murder. When he was brought to homicide, Detective Jason and Detective Calhoun went to the room where he was kept to interrogate the witness. When they entered, Detective Calhoun introduced himself and introduced Detective Jason. Detective Calhoun asked the witness that he heard that he said he had information about a homicide that happened a year ago. The witness said they heard a man admitting to picking Darren up. He said Darren and the man were in the back seat of the vehicle when the man shot Darren. Detective Jason asked the witness what the suspect did with Darren. The witness said they heard the suspect and his friends dump Darren in an area that matches up with where Darren was found. Detective Calhoun asked for the suspect's name. The witness gave Detective Calhoun the suspect's first name and Facebook profile. Detective Calhoun left the interrogation room to look up the suspect in the database. According to their records, the suspect was recently arrested with a small caliber gun. A detective said that could be the murder weapon. The suspect was released from custody, but his gun was still in police evidence. Detective Chase said he has to follow up with the crime lab for some testing on the firearm to see if they can get a ballistic match. He said if it matches, then, based on the story that they were given, it will be enough evidence to get an arrest warrant issued for the potential suspect. 2 months later, the gun did not match the murder weapon. Detective Calhoun will put out a bolo for the suspect with a warrant to collect his DNA. Then, nearly 2 years after Darren's murder, Detective Calhoun was out working on another case when he got a call from patrol. The suspect finally turned up when the patrol pulled him for a traffic violation. Detective Chase headed to where the patrol team detained the suspect. When he got there, the suspect was sitting in the back seat of the patrol team's car. Detective Chase knocked on the mirror of the car and told the suspect to come down. Detective Chase showed the suspect a search warrant for his DNA. Detective Chase told the suspect to open his mouth, and he collected the swab he needed. After collecting the swab, Detective Chase asked the suspect if he was interested in going downtown to talk to him about a homicide. He said he wasn't interested. Detective Chase said he will probably be seeing him soon. He told him to take care of himself, and he entered his car and drove off. 2 days later, Detective Calhoun got a word from the lab. They told him that the suspect's DNA did not match the DNA that was found on Darren's ankle. Detective Calhoun said he is disappointed. He said it doesn't mean that the suspect was not the killer, but he needs to reassess the case and look at what they got. Detective Calhoun worked the case for 2 more solid years without any leads. The case remained unsolved. Detective Calhoun said he wants the public to know the case is still an active investigation. He urged anyone that has information to call the tip line. Nearly 4 years after Darren was killed, his family still hopes someone knows something that will help detectives solve the case.